Anushka Pandey, co-founder and managing editor, The Tattva. This session is being moderated by Mr. Swadesh Singh, Assistant Professor, Satyavati College. I now hand over the session to the respected moderator for further proceedings. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Very hard to come at 9:30 for a session on news consumption after having 2 days of intellectual stimulation and news. So you can also watch, and many are watching on social media. We have a diverse panel here, and they will come up with their different perspective. But before starting this session, let me just to widen our scope of discussion, means the topic new age news consumption. I'm a student of media. I have worked with media organization. News is any double verified information, double checked, coming from a reliable source. But I think we are going to discuss any type of content getting viral on social media, news websites, or elsewhere. And for me, consumption is a very middle class, upper middle class phenomena because on one side, if we see that there are at least 300 million people who are living in rural areas, they have not access to information. In 80s and 90s, we were discussing about calories intake requirement. So our range would be not just news consumption, but information access also. So ranging from requirement, access to consumption, ranging from information, disinformation, misinformation, and then news. With this background, I will start the discussion. I will request Aditi Paswanji. Aditi is assistant professor in Delhi University for her initial remarks. Aditi.
Uh, a very good morning to all of you. Aap sabhi ko pranam. It's an absolute pleasure to be a part of Ideas India Conclave. Now, coming to the topic. So, I have understood this topic in two segments. First, who is creating the content, the information, the news? And second pattern is who is consuming. And when we see both these segments, I have noticed there's a decentralization which is happening. By decentralization, I mean that now more and more people from the periphery, more and more people from the margin, gendered identities, all these people are really coming up, which has completely democratized the media landscape. And it has also led to some sort of a transition, which is initial those archaic dichotomies, urban versus rural, class struggle, rich versus poor. Now there's more nuanced understanding. The idea and the notion of intersectional identities are coming. Now we don't see Dalit news just as plain Dalit news, but there's a greater emphasis on Dalit women also. And it's just not news of their victimhood. It's also stories of their valor, the stories of their resilience. So all these things, the social media platforms has actually made the news platforms for both the segments more inclusive, I would say. And secondly, with this, there are a lot of platforms which are coming where people are owning up their own cultural identities, their own cultural narratives. 2 years back, we celebrated Azadi Ke Amrit Mahotsav. So we saw that, names like Uda Devi, Jhalkari Bai, which were not very regular in our dictum. Now it's becoming a part of a conversation. And that has solely happened because of this new age media, which is proliferating these stories from the peripheral zone into the mainstream media. The mainstream media in itself is a very debatable concept that what do we understand by that. But I can say the popular media, which all of us news, maybe a very urban centric media, and people are owning up these. So I would say that both the segments at somewhere completely make the media landscape a very democratized, where the voices which are little unheard now being heard, and the people who were talking about their own stories are now coming up and people are hearing. So, and it is also changing the way the public opinion, and there's a shift in the perception how people see the news now.
Yeah, rightly pointed out means in mainstream media, people from marginalized communities, especially Dalit, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, far-flung areas of Kashmir or Northeast, they did not find a space, and social media has provided them that space. So media and marginalized. So media is reaching to, but whether the social media is really democratic or really we are able to complete that decentralization, because that we have to discuss. Means in this era of algorithm, the kind of video you see, you will see that kind of video only.
Yeah.
So it is provocative also, polarizing also. So whether it's democratic or not, that is again means we are living in the age of media 4.0 where video is the main content. So whether that is really democratic or not, that we have to discuss more. But before that, I will go to Anushka. Anushka has come up with a good platform on Instagram. That is a new in thing in last few years. Anushka is running a platform called the Tattva. So what is this tattva and how do you see this? Whether this is just a urban middle class phenomena that people are using these kind of social media platforms, reel means we are calling it a reel of generation of reel and all shorts. So what exactly is that? Why the youth are getting more attracted towards this reel, shorts and Instagram in place of Facebook?
First of all, hi, good morning, everybody. Privileged to be a part of this panel amongst such great audience and even greater panel here. I am Anushka, managing editor, The Tattva. The Tattva is known as the leading youth-run digital media platform, not news. I might make that very particular here. And I come from a media background, and I've found the discussions going around the fact that journalism in itself is dying, which might not be true, but could be true partially as well. And when I say so, I mean that the form in which the journalism and news coverage is being done in the past few years is now becoming obsolete for the current generation, the current age, the generation that will own the future from 10 years now, 20 years from now. And when I say so, what do I mean? The current generation doesn't. Why does the current generation not relate to the mainstream media? Is because of multitude of factors. One being the attention span of the people. The current generation is already bombarded with so much of content at a time, so much so that the attention span has now gone down to somewhat, I would say, 3 to 4 seconds. And if you don't make your point in mere 3 to 4 seconds, you lose relevance. And in this day and age, where previously the mainstream media was known for sensationalism, taking the heads of people, now it's more relatability that resonates with people. So the more you resonate with people, the more people would connect with you, engage with you. And in all of these hours that I've put into storytelling, what I have come to believe is the fact that in today's time, storytelling is not merely words, but it's the impact that your words bring out in the community at large, how they build a community, how they foster the community, and how they engage the community. Because on social media platform, the other thing that's happening is the fact that the feedback loop now has become really small. Where in the mainstream media, you could be on the television just professing something that people might or might not relate with, and that could be just one side of the perspective of the spectrum. Now on social media, there are comments wherein if you have said X thing, people who do not resonate with it will always call you out in the comments, will maybe share on stories their part of the story, will not, if they do not resonate with it, will not go further. And now it's not just breaking news, but rather breaking the algorithm with the new age media. Thank you.
Thank you. I will come again to you. Means it's about real generation, but what about the depth and analysis? I will get back to you. So, but before that, we have Andrew Wilson with us, and he works with Hudson Institute and also Center for Future Liberal Society, and he's a research person. So he's a in the background of many researches since last many years. So Andrew, what's your take? Means in this era of ready recipe kind of news or information or misinformation, where do you see this research part of it? Where is this analysis?
Sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Singh, my fellow panelists, and many thanks to Dr. Ram Madhav, Ms. Rami Desai, and the India Foundation team for very graciously hosting us here at this year's conclave. It's a real pleasure. I'm here representing a research center based in Washington, D.C., and headed by Professor Walter Russell Mead. who, as many of you know, is a distinguished fellow at the Hudson Institute, as well as the Global View columnist at the Wall Street Journal. I'd like to speak a little bit today about how our center engages with the news, particularly as it relates to U.S.-India relations and developing even stronger bonds between our two countries and looking to develop additional bridges of understanding. And our center sees that objective, our pursuit of that objective, is to consult a wide range of sources. This is not a specific reliance on the Western source base that we are very familiar with, but to really understand the diversity, the politics, the culture of India, is to go out and pursue the range of media outlets, personalities, thought leaders, influencers within this country, to take away a certain understanding of what each of those entities presents, getting a sense of how reliable those sources are, and marrying those sources with what we are familiar with back in the States. We find this to sort of neutralize sort of the narrative, counter narrative about certain developments in this country, but also in our own country of the United States. And we see in wanting to provide the most objective, fact-based research on the nature of our relationship is to bring those sources together. And that not only takes the form of Professor Mead's written work in the Wall Street Journal, where we endeavor in my role to provide research support, but ultimately in each of those articles, we strive to put out the most accurate information in helping both sides understand the nature of the relationship and areas, opportunities, and challenges to that relationship. So that's just one part. The second part, obviously, is I am here in India here today after a very nice visit, my first visit to the country. That is also a big part of this too, to supplement what we are reading about, to really get on the ground and speak with various people, get their perspectives and bring that home to inform our reporting on our trip and to also, as I mentioned earlier, build those bridges of understanding. So I think that's really the main point I wanted to stress here today. I am not a journalist. I am a researcher, an analyst. And a big part of my job is reading, but not only reading sources I'm familiar with or subscribing to certain narratives or lines of thought, but to go out and seek what lines of thought are common in different pockets of the world. And a big part of our work is understanding those here in India.
Thank you, Andrew. So now we have Deep Haldarji. Deep ji is a senior journalist, though he said that the senior and veteran is just so 20th century. So he has a vast experience in all the three kinds of formats. So Deep ji, when we have more than 1 billion phones, more than 600 million smartphones, more than 400 million Facebook account, more than 300 million Instagram handles in India. So how do you see the role of mainstream? Mainstream, we can say that broad stream. We have to
Yeah.
do broad streaming, not mainstream.
Exactly. That's the word
Very
we
nice.
should.
So because social media is now the mainstream, so in this broad stream, where do you see the existence of the old mainstream like print or even TV or radio? Because Professor Robin Jeffrey, he wrote a very good book, India's Newspaper Revolution, and he covered from 1977 to 1999 that a newspaper revolution took place in India because of the advent of technology, easy access of technology and market. So where is that newspaper revolution with this social media revolution? How do you place both of these things? And how do you place books? He has written two very good books. So these books, newsprint, how they exist means even we had Shekhar Gupta ji yesterday, and you work as contributing editor of The Print, and The Print is not that The Print. Huh? So that is an online medium. So what your is?
Last year, August, I would have agreed with Anushka here. My father's failing health took me back to Kolkata from Delhi. So I'd left my job. And when I was leaving my job, there was this talk of the AI tool ChatGPT and DALI. And, people were saying that ChatGPT is going to take away all the newsroom desk jobs, okay, to begin with. And there was this gloom and doom scenario where people said that, okay, journalism as we know it is dead, journalists are dead. but here I am with you, very much alive. So good morning. But I think I do agree with you that mainstream media, the scope of mainstream media is not just limited to a few media houses in Noida and elsewhere in big cities. Uh, with the emergence of social media and with all these YouTubers and podcasters coming out doing news and analysis, the scope of mainstream media is not limited anymore. But to say that journalism as we know it is over would be very, very, very inaccurate, because I think even today the fact checking of anything that happens, any big event that happens, is still mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream media. I would have wished for new media, if you can call it that, the YouTubers, podcasters, to go where mainstream media did not. But if you speak to the book publishing industry, you know, I think it's worldwide, but also in India, they prefer non-fiction to fiction. I think non-fiction books sell well. And people they approach to write non-fiction books, including me, are people who have been career journalists. Okay. So YouTubers, podcasters, all these new media people, they still have some catching up to do. What this has helped though, and we have Shefali ji right there, that if we goof up, we would previously sit on a pulpit and talk down. So mainstream media can't talk down anymore. You'll be talked right back, and you'll be, almost forced to walk the straight and narrow towards the truth. I think that's a wonderful thing, and that should have happened long back. Thankfully, it's happening now. But the training that is imparted to a career journalist even today is not perhaps the training that a YouTuber, comes to his studio with, unless that YouTuber has been a mainstream journalist. So if you see some of the in the news segment specifically, some of the top YouTubers in the country today, they have done 20, 30 years of journalism, including Shekhar. If you see he was here yesterday. If you see his videos, you may agree with him, you may disagree with him. They get amazing views. I mean, they get almost as much views as YouTubers who have just started out and become popular. So what this has done is it has made that this entire space uh, extremely competitive and exciting, which is a wonderful thing. So we are watching each other, improving our game, and the consumers of news are better off because of that. Okay, they have a wider bouquet to choose from. There's one more thing I'd like to add here. We'll hear a lot of talk about algorithms, and where in TV it used to be TRP, in print it would be circulation figures. As a career journalist, I always think that algorithms are for machines. Human beings tell stories and listen to stories. So whether it's quote unquote mainstream media or new media, you have to perfect the art of telling stories. Okay, if you do that, you have an audience and you'll be alive. So whoever can tell stories well, will be relevant. You can leave the algorithms for the machines.
Very nice. So I have one round of questions from you, then we will open the
Yeah.
discussion, and I will start with you. So, means when you wrote that book on Bengal massacre,
Yeah.
so it was very well received, and I have seen many videos based on that book only. So, how do you see this transformation in young generation, that whether they are reading books and they are getting information from there, or whether they should get information from a relevant, authentic book, then they should go for YouTube or Instagram, or content is good, any kind of content, whether it's information or again misinformation or disinformation? How do you see that?
Well, the fact that those books did well points to the fact that take the best bits from each other. And I think the winner will be the audience. The gentleman who spoke about content, being owned by American companies, I think that's a real scare. All your content is being owned by somebody sitting in Silicon Valley. So India definitely needs to have its own social media platform because you don't own your content. I mean, YouTube, if your YouTube channel does well, then you make a decent amount of money and you can sit here and you can talk about the death of mainstream media. But the bigger scare, which is that content is not yours. It is all owned by somebody sitting in Silicon Valley. So I think India definitely needs, like it has its own newspapers and channels and websites, it needs to have its own platforms, which are owned by Indians.
So we have two questions here, means
Yeah.
very important questions. First, to have a pro Bharat social media handles, and before that, to have our own social media platforms. So once you have your own social media platform originated from Bharat, some experiments were done in the past, and to create the kind of content as Professor Kattimani is raising the questions. So how to do that? Means is there any recipe for that, or we are yet to do some work on that?
Uh, First, I would like to just add on that the same question still lingers on. What is the representation of the marginal communities in the print media, in the mainstream media, in the newspaper, or in the digital media? That question still haunts. I still get calls from people asking that, someone that we can, but people are taking that effort with this
Yes.
diversity, equity, inclusion, on the table. People are taking effort that, the gendered of the table should be maintained. There should be person. So that's a good move. I'm seeing the transition from 2000 to 25. Second, coming to Katimani sir, what he said, absolutely. There are maximum stories about victimization because victimization pain is something which I don't know what the algorithm function, but pain is something which you psychologically connect more. But there are a lot of pages which are also celebrating the victoryhood, and that struggle and that transition is happening. We need to have more and more pages which talk about more em- about empowering these people. You have when we talk about Dalits, they always the or the tribals, we always have this, okay, tribals are archaic, Dalits look in a certain way, but we have Dalits like Milind Kamale, Kalpana Saroj. We have all those who are running more than 100 CR or whatever company they are running. So these are the better side of a new Bharat that we are talking about. But these are not very well discussed or they're not visible. So we need to come up with a lot of pages. I think we should.
So we can have another round of questions. Anyone? Yes. Please.
Here, I entirely agree with Aditi Paswan's theory of cultural promotion through YouTube's and other social media portals. Whereas when it comes to news, able to hear? First, let me congratulate you. Really, it's correct to project the cultural things.
Thank you.
YouTube is necessary and other Instagram like things. Coming to news, and here they mention so many times information. Information is not knowledge. Information can be either good or bad. Okay. And then I am in first, let me tell, I'm in total support of mainstream media because they have
Thank you.
regulation, because they have regulation, and then they project both sides of views and they give actual stories. We can question them, we can read them at leisure. And sometimes, as you said, we can't read fully. Our attention span is very less. When I see the TV, I see the headlines, and wherever I want to scan, I'll scan or skim. That's it. I don't read like earlier times fully in full length.
Thank
So that is there. These social media channels, they have to behave responsibly because you are grooming younger generations. My nieces and nephews, they argue with me. We saw in somewhere in a WhatsApp or some other channel, this way, this way, this way. This is correct.
Please come to your
And I'm
question.
not going to elevate.
Yes.
So the thing is, democratization of media is good. At the same time, the knowledge should be given in a factual way. Do you all agree?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Any other question, please? Yeah, please. Yes, then that's it. Yeah, please, Mike.
Hello. Sir, Thank you, sir, giving
Please be
opportunity.
brief, huh? Brief. We have
Briefly, I will tell. So my problem is actually, so from childhood onwards, I have a habit of reading newspapers. So what happened is in between, I saw the movie Janagan Mana. That is, then I realized, okay, this mainstream media is somewhat partialized and all, somewhat highlighted, and also I'm not able to believe mainstream media nowadays. So how to that one? So for now, I am using source for news, what is going on around the world. So some of the YouTube who are neutral persons will be there. That I'm using for getting information. So I lost actually the trust about mainstream media. How to get back it?
Thank you.
Yeah, that is experience.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, please. No, we are not hearing. Please give him mic.
Hi, good morning. Jaydeep Mazumdar. I'm from Calcutta. I'm practicing media person. Can I sit and
Yeah, please.
see? There's this popular narrative that the democratization of media space, and it's quite impossible to suppress any news that is happening, any event and all. But my experience in Bengal, and I want to comment from anyone in the panel on this, my experience in Bengal has been that a repressive state can very easily suppress news that is very inconvenient to the ruling dispensation, and it happens in my experience very often. What do you have to say about this?
Any other question? Okay.
I'll take Jadita's question. I think it's a very interesting question, and I have to sadly agree with what he's saying. And I think this is where new media comes in. So, Jadita, if you have seen this young guy called Nirajan Saha, he runs something called College Street portal, and there's Shafiqul, of course, who at great risk to life and limb does news from Bengal, which perhaps quote unquote mainstream media is not able to do. So I think that's a space for new media to explore. It should do more. However, the point that gentleman was making about not being able to trust mainstream media, so things like free junkets and the paid promotions. Now those were things that led to people questioning, more and more people questioning mainstream media. But that's happening with YouTubers as well. You have paid promotions of films in very popular YouTube channels. So I think the problems that we faced are problems they are also facing now. So I think but with with more media coming in, I think we can keep an eye on each other and grow together. So one does not necessarily have to sort of survive by killing the other.
Okay. So we are running short of time. Any last question from anyone? Yeah, please. Mike, please.
Thank you very much. I mean, very interesting to hear everybody's viewpoint. I just wanted the issue which you talked about, Ms. Pandey, about social media. The younger generation wants to see the younger face. There are two issues which I'd like to flag, and I'd love to hear your opinions. The first thing is I've just got back from Bangladesh, and I think there's this great angst against India, the anti-India feeling. And one of the reasons that they've attributed to is the social media projection of the Bangladeshis, especially in Bengal, in the vernacular media out there. And it is primarily the social media which has influenced this younger generation to feel that everything that has happened right or wrong with the old dispensation which was in power is thanks to India's thing. So I think the maturity of the media on social to be able to convey the right messages needs to be looked at by these people or platforms that are conducting it. The second issue is, as you said, the attention span is very small. Now, the attention span, when I was younger, I had opinions which were very profound and I felt very strongly about it. But I think as you grew up, you realized that there was another viewpoint. So I think something like what you have influencers on Instagram, I think you need mentors on your social media platforms who give the other viewpoint so that the younger generation gets a more balanced perspective.
Right,
So comments on that.
Thank you, everyone. In 1960s, Marshall McLuhan come up with this idea: media is message. So you are responding.
Yeah. Yes, sir, I do agree with what you have to say. But the fact that the way the thought process of people is working is surely one, because most of the data that we feed into the algorithms are being owned by companies that are settled abroad. And that's the way they own the algorithm, they work with the algorithm. That is what they want to project, and that's how the world looks at it. The one way to go about it could be a very India based approach of going the one that the gentleman suggested, that having something that is India owned or owned locally by the country itself. But since I come from the digital space itself, very sadly, I would want to tell you all that that has major challenges when it comes to the business part of it. Funding is a major part. You do not get in shorts. I hope everybody here is aware of in shorts. The founders just hold 2 to 3% of the company, and that is how, when the major of the company is held by investment firms, you know where the editorial decisions are coming from. So the funding, if sorted, can be great for the businesses working in India. The Twitter alternative that we had for India, it's completely shut now. Why? The funding crunch. So what we need to focus on is more how to incentivize India-based approach on such platforms, how to get up such platforms, and how to encourage the youth to really be behind those platforms, running things in a very literate manner, not illiterate ones. So digital literacy is still something that has to reach out to the masses at large. Yes.
So
Thank you.
when we are using news or information in this new age, so we need pro Bharat content, that is for sure, which is coming out from this platform. For that, we need pro Bharat social media platform. Then only we can produce that kind of content with a good numbers. So when content is the king, so the need of the hour is to produce pro Bharat, pro India content from this and social media platform originating from this land only. Then we can ensure
Right.
and then can imagine India's decade.
Yes.
So thank you very much for participating in this panel. Thank you for your patience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this invaluable session. We would like to honor our distinguished speakers, for which I would now like to first invite Mr. Darshan Raj, founder of Purna Chetana Education Institutions. I request the distinguished speakers to please remain on stage. We would like to honor you. I'd like to welcome Mr. Darshan Raj, founder of Purna Chetana Educational Institution, to felicitate Mr. Swadesh Singh. I'd like to invite Mr. Badrinath and our senior partner at STU Chartered Accountants to felicitate Mr. Deep Halder.
Hi.
Please join me in welcoming Ms. Savita Sulugodu, CEO of Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, to felicitate Ms. Anushka Pandey. I'd also like to invite Mr. Sahil Agarwal to present a memento to Mr. Andrew Wilson. I'd like to please invite Mr. Sai Kiran to felicitate Ms. Aditi Paswal. Thank you, speakers. We'd like everyone to please gather for a quick photograph. Thank you so much, distinguished speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue this impactful conclave, it is my privilege to introduce the esteemed speakers for our next panel discussion on the Cosmopolitan Bharat. To lead this discussion, we have as chair Ms. Rupa Vasudevan, founder and chancellor of Bharatiya Engineering, Science and Technology Innovation University. Ms. Rupa Vasudevan. To join her in this esteemed panel, we have panelists Mr. Anil Antony, National Secretary and Spokesperson BJP, I'd like to please invite Mr. Anthony as one of our distinguished panelists onto the stage, please. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Anand Prasad, Senior Partner, AP and Partners Advocates, onto the stage to join us as one of the distinguished panelists. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Anand Prasad. May I now invite Mr. Apurv Kumar Mishra, Consultant, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, Government of India. Mr. Apurv Kumar Mishra. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Shefali Vaidya, author, speaker, and fellow at Ananta Leadership Program. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Shefali Vaidya.
Check. Check it.
Thank you so much, panelists. Please join me in once again welcoming Ms. Rupa Vasudevan, Mr. Anil Antony, Mr. Anand Prasad, Mr. Apurv Kumar Mishra, and Ms. Shefali Vaidya. Now over to our chair, Ms. Rupa Vasudevan. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I think there's something to be switched on behind.
The mic.
Very sorry. Not here. Yeah. Hello. I hope I'm audible. Very morning to.
No, you're not.
Very good morning to all of you. Namaskar. And welcome to the session, Cosmopolitan Bharat. I have some very esteemed panelists here with me who are from diverse backgrounds. We have politics, we have history, religion, policy, and we have law. And we are here to talk about cosmopolitanism and cosmopolitan Bharat. Now, what does cosmopolitan mean to me? I am personally bred in Bombay, Pune, mix and confluence of cultures. I speak about 7 languages. I lived throughout my life in Bombay, and I found my work space taking me to Bangalore. I travel a lot. So I think each one of us sitting here is a Cosmo in that sense, because we have we are cultural ambassadors first, with a global mindset. This is how I would like to put it. Each one of us here, and the ones who are cosmopolitan, who are from the urban cities of India, we we should, or we must, take culture with most pride with us. And I think we are somewhere the drivers of the economic and cultural ascent for this country. So, Cosmopolitan Bharat, in my terms, it embodies a blend of global and Indian values, balancing tradition with modernity. Now, when I look at the intellectual ecosystem from where I come in, uh, for example, I was in the US last week, and we were uh, part of a delegation which had visited fraction of the universities in the US, which is from Florida and Arizona. There was a meeting with all the presidents, about 10 presidents of public universities in the USA. And I was astonished that on the table, on the dining table, we had 6 presidents from Indian origin, and 4 were Telugu. So I think there is a huge intellectual contribution to intellectual ecosystem across the globe. I mean, needless to say, we have 260,000 students visiting US every year. If I only look at US, and that's billions of dollars as tuition fees. Besides this, we also have MIT, we have Harvard and Stanford, who have chairs and professors and research professors who are from India. Now, this is when I look at the Indian ecosystem. When I look at culture, when I look at Bollywood, when I look at
arts. I think we are taking great strides in these aspects as well. So this is cosmopolitan for us, holding on to the cultural pride, our civilizational legacy, while driving a global mindset. Recently, I read it was very interesting that one Miss Leela Nair, she is now the CEO. We all know about Priyanka Chopra and Shah Rukh Khan, who are driving different brands and brand Bharat across the globe. But Leela Nair is a fashion icon, and she's taken over as the CEO of Chanel, which is one of the top French designer brands. This is just last week. I think the boundaries also in India, when you talk about metros and the cities, is diminishing. It is no longer Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi. It's now Kochi, Mysore, and Indore. These cities have come up, and I was talking to my colleague here, Neetu from IBM, and she was telling me that they have recently set up three huge corporate units in Kochi and in Lucknow. So I would like to begin this discussion by asking all my panelists here on the topic today, your insights and your thoughts on what's Cosmopolitan Bharat for you. Prasadji.
Thanks. Thanks, Rupa. And pleasure to be here speaking to all of you. Um, Question that you might have is what does a lawyer have to say on issues like this? So, from a lawyer's perspective, it's more like a drawing room discussion, but I do have a plug in into issues of law, which will be sort of underlying basis for how you can build a cosmopolitan society under the sort of overall perspective of saying rule of law. So what is cosmopolitan? It's actually multicultural, multinational, and in some ways, as the Indians, we are actually our cities are already trained for this because we have many subnationalities and all of them blend in our cities. So we have that elementary training in terms of being liberal, free, open, accepting of various subcultures, etc. How will we open this up for the world overall? Um, and if you look at it, what are the underlying features of a cosmopolitan city? If you look at various cities in the world that would pop in your mind when you say cosmopolitan, you say Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore. I'm skipping Mumbai for the minute, but Dubai, London, New York, San Francisco. There are a bunch of others that might be there. But Paris need not necessarily fit into your stereotypical cosmopolitan, nor need Amsterdam. So, what is cosmopolitan? And if you look at the defining features of these cities, you will find they will sort of push further individual liberty or personal liberty. Will be fun loving cultures. All of that is true for all of us. We are open and we are fun loving people. We like colors. We are not gray and white people. Um, The other element, and it goes to the theme of this conference itself, which is building brand India. And the question is, how far can brand take an idea? And I would sort of venture to say that a brand does get, even a poor product can be sold for a while, a mediocre product can be sold for a longer time. But if you truly want a sustainable selling product, your underlying architecture must be strong and robust. And that is where I'll sort of weigh in, and whenever maybe it's in the next round when it comes to, is that what is it as India that we need to do that can create that extremely robust architecture, which works not necessarily for international citizens coming to live in India, but primarily focused on who we are. Does it work for our people? Do we make it attractive enough? If it is attractive enough for us, it will be attractive enough for people from outside to come and stay in India. So we need not necessarily be saying we want best in the world. We want to be the best in the world. Our legal system must be best in the world. Our legal system must be best for our people. And that is the big difference because we are not in a race. We are here to deliver for our people. And what makes things better for our people will make it attractive for people from outside to come here. We have other elements in terms of, and I would say more religion than culture, which makes us hugely attractive. But then those are things as we come to the next round. Thank you.
Shefali ji.
Thank you so much. When I was first called as a speaker at India Ideas Conclave, India Foundation was trolled for calling just a housewife with 30,000 Twitter followers.
where in the last 7 years, I'm just a housewife who has published 5 books, who has more than 1 million followers on social media, who ran a campaign called No Bindi, No Business, which changed brand behavior, and who runs a social empowerment initiative for weavers in 5 states. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because that tells you the ethos of Bharat's cosmopolitanism, because we truly believe, and we have been believing this since millennia, that Anu Bhadra Kritavo Yantu Vishwata, meaning let good thoughts come to us from all sides. No discussion on the cosmopolitan nature of Bharat can be complete without understanding what we think of being cosmopolitanism. Nowadays, we think of the word cosmopolitanism as a very urban phenomenon. We talk about cities and how people from different cultures come there and it's a melting pot. But that is not what is Bharat's idea of cosmopolitanism, because we have always talked about Udara Charitanam Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. In fact, if you look at the basis of the word cosmopolitanism, it comes from the Greek word cosmos and politas, which means the world and citizenry. So it essentially means the citizen of the world. But if we look at our own thoughts, we see that as far back as the Atharva Veda, when we talk about the Prithvi Sukta, there is a hymn number 45 which says that the earth is full of people who speak different languages, who have different customs, who have different thoughts and beliefs, and let Mother Earth nourish us, sustain us like a milk cow so gently. That is the thought that is underlying Bharat's own cosmopolitanism. And till we really understand that, any Western model of cosmopolitanism is invalid in Bharat, because then we are trying to force fit a model that comes from outside, which is contrary to our ways. So there is 3 ways, just give me 30 seconds. There are 3 ways in which Bharat's cosmopolitanism is different from the Western concept of cosmopolitanism. First is we believe in acceptance, not tolerance. There's a big, big difference here. And Swami Vivekananda had talked about it in his famous Chicago address, where he said that Bharat is not just tolerant of other belief systems, but we truly accept that everybody has their own version of truth. That is the difference. This is something that we have seen. If we go back to our history, we see that Bharat has always welcomed people from around the world, not just in India. So when Yuan Sang came to Bharat in 630, that's the 7th century, he did not know the language, he did not know the people, he did not know anything. But he traveled from Kashmir to Kanchipuram, he traveled to Sialkot, he traveled to Nalanda, and he was always welcomed. And not only did they say, tell us your thoughts, but also take back our thoughts with you. And that is the basis of Bharat's cosmopolitanism. We need to understand that first in order to talk about how Bharat is going to take this particular theory of cosmopolitanism in future.
Thank you. Apur?
Thank you, Rupaji. Let me first begin by congratulating India Foundation and Ram Mataji for putting together a brilliant ideas fest over the last 3 days. Truly cosmopolitan in nature, and for making me a part of it. There are a broad category of worldviews which are labeled as cosmopolitan, and life choices which are labeled as cosmopolitan. But at the heart of all of these worldviews and life choices is this idea that all humans, irrespective of their political affiliations, are part of a single community. Now, some cosmopolitanisms talk about the single community as a political community, some talk about a common economic community, some talk about a common moral community. But in each of these 3 manifestations, the cosmopolitan ideal is a response to the local culture, local context, local state, and to the vernacular culture. When cosmopolitans talk about their worldview, they always contrast between our traditional attachment to politics and our natural ties to humanity. This worldview had very different trajectories in the West and in India. In the West, the tension between this universal and particular attachments that individuals have was particularly acute, because there's a big tension between these 2 kinds of attachments that the cosmopolitan worldview talks about. Because the foundations of Western philosophy were very particular in nature. You look at Plato, you look at Aristotle, they spoke about citizens' loyalty to the city state. Right? And as Shefali explained, we had a very different starting point in our own conception of the relationship between a citizen and the state, and the relationship between citizen and the universe. And which is why cosmopolitanism in the West had to go through several epochs of struggle before it could have its capstone achievement in the creation of a world order based on international law, which was imposed by world courts like ICJ and ICC. And you had a system of international governance, which provided global public goods to institutions like UN and the EU. But this was a very long and a difficult journey for the cosmopolitan ideal. On the other hand, in Bharat, there was no tension between our citizenship of the polis and the citizenship of the cosmopolis, because the same moral order in our worldview that underpins the cosmos is also the same moral order which grounds our political and social life, which is what the Rig Veda calls as the Rit and the later texts call as Dharma. I mean, it's not a coincidence that it was an Indian, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who wrote to the great French diplomat Talleyrand in the 1830s to abolish the passport system, saying that because the world is a family, we should allow all human beings to enjoy each other's cultures freely. You see the cosmopolitan ideal in the trajectory of our independence movement. I mean, you think about Swami Vivekanand, Aurobindo, Gandhi, Rabindranath Tagore, and they borrowed. I mean, our entire freedom struggle borrowed both ideas and material resources from all over the world, and so even our freedom struggle was very cosmopolitan in nature. And like I said, in Bharat, this contradiction between our particular and universal attachments is not very strong, because we believe that the same moral order which underpins the cosmos also underpins our state. What happened though is at some point, probably in the 20th century, although this started with the French Revolution, which spoke in absolutist terms, at some point, cosmopolitanism from being a worldview hardened into an ideology, and it became a proxy for capital L liberalism and the destination where Fukuyama's history would end. When and so when cosmopolitanism hardened into an ideology, uh, cosmopolitans and those people who ascribe to this world, this ideology, did not just want to exceed or transcend their local context, but wanted to demean and erase all local context. National attributes became national prejudices, and a borderless world where nothing was unfamiliar became the only pathway for human flourishing, for equality, and for freedom. And so, multiculturalism, which is another manifestation of this worldview, almost became proxy, a synonym for monoculturalism. Right. Now, those of us in this room, for us, this sounds very suspiciously like the utopias of the Marxists and the faith supremacists. And which is why uh, we have suspicions about cosmopolitan ideology as it is phrased and understood today. Uh, and which brings me to this response that we have towards this ideology, the worldview which has now hardened into an ideology. Roger Scruton, the great conservative philosopher, coined a term for this malignant form of cosmopolitanism. He called it oikophobia, which is a fear of your cultural home. That you have a reflexive dislike for everything that reminds you of home. And he said that you particularly see this in the social elites, in the academia, in the cultural figures of your home society, in the bureaucracy, and in some parts of diaspora. In his view, oikophobia, fear of your cultural home, is a sign of a civilization in decline, one that has stopped believing in itself, that hates itself, and therefore is not willing to defend itself. You see some elements of this oikophobia, and you can see why Western philosophers coined this term because of what's happening in the West today. And they've said, and this is where I end my initial remarks, that the response oikophobia is what they call oikophilia, a love for the things that are not just mine and yours, but ours. And so I think what you will see in our lifetimes is this tension between these two tendencies, and in which cosmopolitanism has morphed. This tension between oikophobia and oikophilia. Thank you.
Thank you, Apurv. Swanajit. Yes.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of the India Foundation, Ram Madhavji, Rami, and everybody else for inviting me here and for putting me in this very stimulating panel. So now I wouldn't want to come across as a historian or an anthropologist because I'm neither of the two. But when we, like, I'm giving my personal views. So when we speak of our topic, one thing which I would like to start by saying is, at least as far as my understanding is understanding, India's inherent nature was always cosmopolitan or internationalist in nature. We are a civilizational country. And for centuries or even more than that, we had been the progenitor of a lot of, scientific knowledge, technology, um, even architecture, history, culture. And India as a country has always strived to influence even our surroundings. You can see the influences in many of the neighborhood, even South Asian countries, even West Asian countries, everywhere you can see the influences that we had built over time. And we as a country, we always did it in a manner which was not as being an aggressor or being a hegemon, but we always influence. Then, the time leading to independence, you had a long period where we had a lot of invasions also, you had the colonial past also. And during that point of time also, the inherent nature never changed. Like, we were always what we were. But then things got a little skewed. And it reached a stage where a lot of Indian ways or our own ways, it were suppressed or there was a devaluation which came with time. But now today, the Ideas Conclave, the theme itself is Emerging Bharat, India's decade. And in the last 10 years and in the recent past, we are seeing a renaissance where, first of all, we are a young country. We are a country where 65% plus is under 40. And there are tremendous forces around. You have growing technology, higher integration of technology. You have the internet. It's a globalized world. There is a lot of immigration, a lot of travel. But now, when compared to any time in the past, we are seeing an India, especially a young India, which is using all these forces to fuel their aspirations, to fuel mobility. And now, in this interconnected, globalized world, you are seeing India and Indians, especially urban Indians, young Indians, who are capable of using the forces you see around to channel our countries and their personal aspirations as well as you know, uh, their desire for mobility. So India always, like one of my esteemed panelists always said, said, our worldview was always Vasudeva Kudumbam. Like last year, we hosted the G20 also. And in this very turbulent world of full of turmoil and a lot of turbulence, India is once again like portraying our main belief, our worldview that it's an interconnected world. It's a world where everybody are a part of a same family. And it's only through um, a lot of mutual understanding and collaborations and coexistence that we all can sustain and go together as a world. That's always India's point of view. And now young India are becoming brand ambassadors of That's what I would say.
Thank you. And we have different thoughts here. A, to make it attractive for us and make Bharat attractive for others. So I take my question from there. What are the two ideas in the India Ideas Conclave that you would like to share that we could take back for doing this exact thing, make it attractive for others. So,
So if I may, we look at the cities that I spoke of as cosmopolitan. What is it that makes them cosmopolitan? I'd say two primary features. One, it is safe, comfortable, and it's a city that you can go to which protects your liberty. Now, as a foreigner, think of yourself relocating to some city to another country and see how do you feel about it. The place that you feel comfortable is most likely where you will relocate to. If you are uncomfortable, you will not go there. So that's one element, and therefore, what is it that we can do? And when I speak in terms of making a foreigner comfortable, I'm also talking principally in terms of how do you make Indians comfortable and make the system operate for everybody. Because if you focus on us, you will automatically become
focus on
attractive to somebody else in that context. The other is you go to why do you migrate? Principally for business reasons. Do I make more money? Does my quality of life go up? And so, therefore, what is it that we can do from a business perspective to make things better? And that would be my second set of ideas. The third is, I think, just inherently, I feel fortunate that I was born in this land because I have natural access to a lot of Devi and Devatas, which in most other parts of the world you will not. That is a huge attraction when you think in terms of India, is that this is the place that you can actually find your Devatas. For me, I found Devi. Um, so if I go back to saying, what will make the first point, how do you make a place comfortable, how do you make it safe, and how do you protect individual liberties? So there are a whole set of administrative measures that need to be taken, including changing the police system and stuff like that. But the two important things that come in the sort of space of delivery of justice, which is where I come from, is speed of justice. How quickly can we do it? And I would say two points in terms of what you can do to change speed of justice. One, move to virtual courtrooms. So just now, if you see, a lot of our backlogs and our process is delayed because we lack infrastructure. We lack infrastructure in terms of physical infrastructure and in terms of humans that can actually man those courtrooms as judges. But if you move to virtual courtrooms, to put in place a technological solution is significantly cheaper when it comes to physical infrastructure. So no more land, no more buildings, but you actually put television screens and you improve connectivity. So virtual courtrooms can actually transform the speed at which justice is delivered. The other one is, and not too many people understand this so well, uh, but is the use of artificial intelligence. And how do you use AI? You will see that with uh, with Elon coming into the US government, how they will actually change governance using AI. I partly know Elon because he's a client of mine in two of his companies. Um, but the idea would be, how can you bring down, if you go to a court today, it takes you 4 or 5 years to get justice. We live in a world where we want instant gratification. Are you going to wait for 3 or 4 years? You'll actually just give up that right. How can we do something to make sure justice is delivered in 4 to 8 weeks? If you ask me, is it possible? It is possible. For various kinds of disputes, you can deliver justice using AI in 4 to 8 weeks. And there are different countries in different areas that are actually delivering this. We need to be able to move past our reticence in terms of no, only a human needs to be a judge and allow an algorithm to take the role of a judge. Because are you going to perpetuate injustice by delay, regardless of whether you have a good case or a bad case? Or can you actually move to saying, I'll use AI and then start delivering justice? And I'm writing a book on legal reform, and a lot of this is in detail, much more over there. The other element is business environment. Now, ease of doing business is sort of constantly uh, thought of. I would say, in terms of ease of doing business, we probably ought to be thinking in terms of indigenizing the legal system. So, what do I mean by that? We've inherited this imperial idea of sovereign immunity. Now, how good is sovereign immunity? So, anything that a judge or a bureaucrat does, as long as he says, I did it in good faith, even if he gets it horribly wrong, he goes scot free. The question is, should that continue to remain? Just look at our epics. If somebody does something which is horribly wrong, karma has come back and hurt you. Whether you are Jaya Vijaya guarding the doors of Vishnu, or your Dasharatha who mistakenly shoots somebody, or your Pandus shoot somebody, there is no out. You have to face the consequences. Why do we hide behind this idea of sovereignty? All our kings in the past used to be subject to this whole idea that you are not entitled to protection. So that what it does is it puts a huge responsibility on decision making as against what we today have, zero responsibility. Everything is, it sort of bounces off me. So I'm Teflon coated if I'm in government or I'm state. The other is when we go to a courtroom, what do we expect? We expect justice. What do we have? Actually, we don't think of it in those terms. We have got courts or judges that are like umpires. So they hear two sides of the case and decide one is right.
Yeah.
What we need is inquisitorial courts, a court that actually functions as an investigator and delivers justice. So this is not a
Right.
new idea. Europe functions in inquisitorial courts. So that's the sort of move that it was.
Yeah,
Those
right.
are the ideas.
So I think now we will move to Shefali. What are the ideas that you would like to share with us to position Bharat
See,
as brand Bharat?
I come back
Because
to my basic idea that if we have to talk about brand Bharat and we have to develop our own brand of cosmopolitanism going into the future, we don't really have an option but to go back to our past and figure out what is it that made us special. See, the West, when it talks about cosmopolitanism, it talks about the melting pot theory where everybody subsumes their own local identities and emerges as, say, in the context of America, for example, emerges as an American. That is the melting pot theory. But we are not a melting pot civilization. We are a well made curry where you can taste every ingredient. I'm a housewife, no, so I
it's
have to give you
ready-made.
that analogy. So, where we can taste every ingredient individually, but together it makes a seamless flavored dish. That is our own brand of cosmopolitanism. And this was told in a very catchy, in a very intuitively understanding way by a rickshawala to a friend of mine who was traveling, an American friend of mine who was traveling in Kashi. And he asked this auto driver that, okay, I can understand there is one big temple of Kashi Vishwanath, it's famous for it. Why are there so many other temples of Shiva right next to each other? What is the point of this? It's the same God. Why are there so many temples? So the auto driver smiled and said, Babuji, सीधी सी बात है, वाईफाई टावर एक ही है, हर एक कोई अपने लॉगिन और पासवर्ड से इंटरनेट को एक्सेस करता है. So I cannot talk about Indian cosmopolitanism in a better, easier way than this analogy.
Right.
So when we are talking about developing our own brand of cosmopolitanism, it doesn't have to be that you dissolve all your identities. Our equality is not about sameness. I'm equal, but I'm different. He is equal, but he is different. That is our cosmopolitanism. And if we go back to that, only that will sustain. Otherwise, it will be just a blind aping of the West and force fitting Western ideas onto an Indian ethos, which really doesn't recognize it. I'll give you an example of Marwadi families. They have been traveling to every state of Bharat, and I will give you the example of two states which are very, very particular about their culture, about their language, about their ethos, which is Tamil Nadu and West Bengal, right? So, Marwadi families have migrated that 200, 300 years ago in both these states, and they have assimilated beautifully in the sense that they have all learned local languages, they follow all local customs, some of them have adopted a local dress as well. But does that mean that they have forgotten their own culture? No. They still speak Marwadi at home. They still follow their own festivals, their own customs. They still do their own rituals their own way. And that is what is our brand of cosmopolitanism is, and which has worked the other way also. So when the British took indentured labor from Bharat to many countries in the world, whether it's the Caribbean islands, whether it's Mauritius, whether it's Guyana, they took with them their culture. They have been there now for multiple generations. They are locals there and they have assimilated with the local language, local culture. But does it mean that they have forgotten their language? Does it mean they have forgotten their religion? Does it mean that they have forgotten their culture? No, they haven't. Because that is the ingrained idea of cosmopolitanism patriotism that we have in Bharat, which people have taken everywhere they go. And that is the same courtesy that we have accorded to people who have come to Bharat. So that is why a Heliodorus can come from Greece as an ambassador to an Indian king's place, and then he can erect a Garuda Stamba, which is 2000 years ago. And he writes an inscription there that I am Heliodorus, I am a Bhagavata, I am a servant of Vishnu. Nobody forced him to say that. Nobody put a gun to his head and said that you must become a Bhagavata. This kind of assimilation happened because this country, this civilization, gave the mental space for people, in his words, oikophilia. You love your own culture, but you also become a part of the greater culture. As an individual, you retain your individuality, but it's like a giant buffet. There are multiple things, and everybody has the choice to pick and choose whatever you want. It's never okay. We also deal in thalis, but even in the thali, there are multiple things which you don't really mix. We are never melting pot civilization.
But this I have seen even in the Gen Z because I work with a lot of youth. And in recent times, what has happened is, they are more and more involved with the culture, with the heritage. We have a lot of these programs that happen at the university, which is to do with know yourself, know your country, know your culture. And we have tremendous response from the students for these programs.
Yeah.
Even the Gen Z, which we call, are a little disconnected from what we know from our times. But I think the awareness is much more than what it was earlier.
Definitely.
And also because of the social media, awareness comes from the social media and different aspects from where they get the exposure. Yes, Apurv,
So, Rupa,
what
I
are
think,
your ideas to
yeah,
position cosmopolitan Bharat?
right. So, in 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 providing a counterpoint to this malignant form of Western cosmopolitanism, talking about cosmopolitan Bharat does not mean that we are not introspective. But there is a way to be self-reflective without being self-defeating. Right? You see some cosmopolitan elites in our country who gloat over the failures of our country and of our fellow citizens. And recently, an Indian company lost an international contract, and people were celebrating it. Some people were gloating about it. That tendency we have to avoid. And so, while we must avoid both naive self promotion, we must also avoid self contempt. How does this translate into our political life and in our social life? In our political life, I think Bharatiya cosmopolitanism and also uh, some of the original cosmopolitan worldviews in the West placed a greater emphasis on private associations, social institutions to take care of the health of the community and of the individual rather than a top down governmental control, something that Anand was alluding to. So I think a small state which does fewer things but does them well would be in conformity with Bharatiya cosmopolitanism. In the realm of social life, I do think that we have to turn away. What I mean, the places in our country where this cosmopolitan ideology is at its peak is in cities, but also the elite sections of the cities. And one of the things that I see in course of my interactions with young people, former students, is this ultra individualism, which has created a generation of young people which are connected but lonely. And I do think that our Bharatiya conception of cosmopolitanism, which places emphasis on the role of social ties, social communities, social institutions, must step in to take care of the negative effects of this ultra hyper individualism that plagues, especially our urban youth. Thank you.
True, that's true as well. Yes, yes, Anand.
Yes. Now, if you ask me on, let's say, placing brand Bharat in a world,
Politics.
in a cosmopolitan lens. So overall, I would say India's ability to place our brand in a global world, even in a cosmopolitan lens, it will it depends, and it will depend on a lot of capacity we create, our growth trajectory, and also a kind of understanding of where we come from. So it's a combination of many factors. So at this moment, like me and many of the people sitting here are also fairly young. We are a young country. I keep on stressing that. And one thing which I notice is more than any time in the past, the young India is much more, they have broken from a lot of shackles which they used to be there in the past. And there is a lot of confidence in being and expressing themselves. That is something which you see in this current age aspiration in India. And then now you go to a global perspective also. One, we are much more unlike in the past. We have understood like where we come from. We understand that we are a civilizational country. We have a rich culture and heritage. But then at the same time, in a global setting, India currently, that brand Bharat, it is going further and further because of the current trajectory we are having also. For example, like in the last 10 years, our economic strength itself, one parameter. A 2 trillion economy has now become like a 4 trillion economy, where suddenly we are the fifth largest economy. Our prime minister is having now a vision of being the third largest economy in the next 3 years. So economic strength suddenly is giving us a lot of gravitas while we are trying to, let's say, position our brand Bharat in a global stage. In the last 3, 4 years, there had been many disruptive events. Like, for example, there was a pandemic. So during the pandemic also, what could India do? Like, we could give vaccines to 100 different countries. We could give pharmaceutical products to 150 different countries. Similarly, now there are conflicts happening across, like there is one in Gaza, there is one in Ukraine. And every time India is able to, let's say, give a voice, and the world is now, let's say, telling our prime minister and our leadership to um, play a part in trying to bring peace and stability. Why is all that happening? It is because of our growing strength and our capacity. So, this positioning brand Bharat in front of the world, finally, it will depend on multiple factors. One is we'll have to keep on building capacity, keep on bringing our building values. At the same time, it's again being more confident of who we are and where we come from, because it's a combination of these two that will enable this brand Bharat to be reaching its fullest potential. This is my view.
So modernity plus tradition. Now here, past 2 days while I was listening to all these sessions, right from the Honorable Finance Minister to the yesterday's sessions. Everybody spoke about skills. Everyone spoke about the youth as our brand ambassadors for the future. So, what I was thinking as a university educationist, or that universities are uniquely positioned to integrate the traditional expertise that we have and the traditional wisdom with the newer digital technologies that can create profound learner experiences for the students, and that also aligns to the future of Bharat. So, I would now like to take some questions. Yes, please.
So, my name is Shashwat. It's more of a submission that I'd like to make about the cosmopolitan nature of Bharat. So, when we talk about cosmopolitanism, we talk about metropolitan cities and like big, huge cities. But I come from a small Himalayan town of Dharamshala. And I believe that Dharamshala is a true example of Bharatiya cosmopolitanism because we have the Tibetan refugees who are living there. We have a lot of uh, we have a lot of Israelis who are coming and living there, and then we have the local Bharatiya population, the Himalayan people who are living there. So you can actually walk from a Chabad house to a monastery to a Shiva temple, and I believe that this is the beauty of Bharatiya culture and the Sanatan Dharma, that all of this, the society that they're living in, that peace is not actually, it's not forced, or it's not, uh, all of that is just happening very naturally. And I feel that that is what is a true example of Bharatiya cosmopolitanism.
Thank you.
There's one here, please.
So,
After this, please. Yeah.
Namaskar. So my question is to Apurji. And, if I were to say that we build a cosmopolitan city from scratch, the prime consideration would be to design it on cultural lines, or it would be actually to primarily make it an economic powerhouse and then kind of try to make it cosmopolitan. So which one of them would come first in today's day and age?
Yes. You
Should I answer that?
Yeah, yeah. Right.
No, I don't think there's a trade-off between economic and cultural progress. I think the two go hand in hand. You think about the peak of British cultural influence. It coincided with the peak of the British Empire. You think about the peak of American cultural influence, Hollywood, the way we speak, the food that we eat. It coincides with the peak of American economic power. So I don't think there's a strict trade-off uh, economic progress and so cultural progress. Well, the fact that I come from the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, I'm slightly biased towards leaning more towards the economic rationale for building new cultural spaces, cosmopolitan spaces, because I do think that once you earn the resources, you can spend those resources to build the world that best suits your interests. So yeah, that's me.
Can I add a little bit to
Yes,
this?
please.
Yeah.
See, economic prosperity will always encourage people from all parts of the world or all parts of the
Yes.
country to come somewhere. And then, as long as you don't force homogeneity on them, as long as you tell them that, okay, you're a part of a greater
We are
whole,
inclusive.
but
Yeah.
you're also, be proudly a part of who you are. That is what cosmopolitanism is. So, in that sense, I think the finance minister also said this: Dharmasya moolam artha. It is the artha, it is the economy that drives dharma, that drives the culturalism, multiculturalism, or whatever it is that you call it.
Yes, Dr. Abhishek.
Thank you very much. Just a comment. We overcome the word secular and Bharat becomes Bharat. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Rajiv ji.
Rajiv Srinivasan. This is a question primarily to the two of you. When we talk about cosmopolitanism, we have two examples. One is a Western, or let's say
Yes.
American cosmopolitanism, but there is another metro, which is the Eastern version. One is highly individualistic, as you were saying. The other is collective. And should we take one of those paths, or should we tread a middle path? What would be the right thing? That's one question. A very quick comment to Advocate Anand. You were, in my opinion, wondering whether we should have AI judges, right? We ran a panel on AI. It's an existential threat to the entire civilization. So it would be much better to have an AI judge assistant, not an AI judge. Thank you.
Hi, this is Venkatesh. I just want to know your comment, because is India is need a skill India, or is India is need a will India for agency?
Can you repeat that, please?
We need a skill India, or we need will India, because willingness is missing in the
Will
youth
willingness.
today.
We need to will
Skill
India.
or,
Will
skill
India.
or will.
Okay. I don't think they are completely opposing
Yeah.
ideas, Will India, I mean, being Indian is what is going to drive your skill set. If we capitalize on our innate Indianness, and that automatically tells you which is the path to take while skilling, which brings me to Rajiv ji's observation that Indian cosmopolitanism and taking it forward for Brand Bharat is actually a Suvarna Madhya between individualism and collectivism. If you are extremely individual, you will build silos where there is no connection between the different sections of society. But you have to, like, we are innately a duty based society, but now we are moving increasingly towards a rights based civilization. The real option is to find somewhere a golden mean between the two.
Hello, sorry.
So AI and justice, you're absolutely right. I mean, AI, you can't just jump into and start setting up AI judges. So stage one would actually be AI supplementing a judge or supporting a judge for our society to gain confidence in that quality of judgment that is delivered, and then gradually figuring out, do we have enough human capital to actually get this done, or can we templatize? Because if you look at the kind of disputes that exist, many of them come in silos. You can actually there are similar principles that apply, similar facts to all of them. So if once decided, you can actually use the same template for everybody else. So but that transition probably will need to happen once enough confidence is there that you can actually move to a human judge. Just anecdotally, in the UK, at one point in time, they tried AI judges for motor vehicles situations, accident claims. Apparently, and I don't know how they come to this sort of conclusion, but 79% of the times the AI judge got it right, which basically means that 79% of the times, if the decision was appealed, it would sort of be sustained, it would not be reversed. That is much higher in terms of success rate than when you come to a human judge and how many human judge judgments get appealed.
Yeah, we'll take a question from there, please.
Hi, good morning. I'm Prasad here from Bangalore. I just have a question to the panel. We've been discussing about the cosmopolitan nature and the brand Bharat. I would like to find out if you could just address how are you trying to find out the inclusiveness of the tribal population in India? We are more than 8% in India. We are more than 8% population in India of tribal people. How do you think that can be addressed by the panel?
Like to take it.
I see, if you again go back to the past, you will realize that every social group in India has its own place in the social ethos. And today, there are so many things that we can learn from the tribal cultures of Bharat. When we talk about sustainability, they are the ideal example of sustainability. They used every resource judicially. Their needs are very, very limited. And the kind of civic sense that the tribal villages have, I don't know how much you've traveled. I went to Bastar a couple of years ago, and when I saw the villages, there was not a speck of dirt, there was not a speck of litter. Every little inch of the house, when you talk about minimalism, there are now huge reels, where people tell you how to reduce clutter and how to make your house clutter free. This is a way of life for our tribal. So there are so many things that we can learn from them. All we need to do is, I think, get out of our comfort zones and actually go and talk to them and try to learn from them. That is what I would do.
There's a last question here, and
Ma'am,
then we. Okay.
Thank you very much for a
I
very
think this will be the last question. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, ma'am, Chair, for admitting the question, and thank you. Well, when you talk about cosmopolitanism, there are, in the context of Bharat, I mean, I'd say that India today, as it stands, is not a country; it's a continental federation. You're now in Karnataka. Karnataka has a language with its own script, which is totally different. 1956, linguistic states were accepted. Otherwise, there were Kannada districts in Bombay Presidency, in Madras Presidency, in Mysore State. Just to take one example, this was replicated across the country. In the interest of brevity, it's not being elaborate. Same way, you see, effectively, you have ethno-linguistic provinces which could easily stand as a Poland or Slovak Republic, or even as another France or something. So when we talk about cosmopolitanism in the Indian context, already India being being a continental federation, how do you address that? And it's quite often in practice it's noticed that provincial and often community loyalties really overstep the so-called national loyalties. And in all metropolitan cities where you have large migrant populations, the question is really, I mean, can cosmopolitanism really exist? Because metropolitan cities are supposed to be multicultural or cosmopolitan, but really there's one dominant language group, and there are other language groups that just exist on the fringes.
Yeah,
No
thank
more.
you. I will ask.
I would like to answer that. Yeah, please go ahead.
I think that's a
Just
great
just in
question.
about a minute. We exactly have a minute, please.
I think that's a great question. We do have, and I think what you're alluding to is because of our different cultures and subcultures, there is this element of prejudice, and then how do you deal with it? Because do we truly want to be cosmopolitan when you look at the angst that comes against migrating populations in different parts of India? And that is where I say that you do need the rule of law. because you need to deal with prejudice. So the law needs to deal with prejudice. The vast majority actually are open, but there will be a minority that carries great degree of prejudice that they bring to the streets. That is where the law enforcement needs to be there, which is where safety becomes paramount. And therefore, how does the state deliver safety? Because once you have that, you'll find that the voice of the majority will come forth a lot more than the minority that gets onto the street.
Right.
Thank you.
I think
I
I'll
want
have.
to answer quickly his question. I think what he looks at a challenge, the innate multiculturalism of this country, I consider is it as this country's greatest strength, which
Strength,
is
yeah.
what has held together. He's talking about Karnataka. I'll give you an example of the district Uttar Kannada and Dakshin Kannada, where there are people of three ethnicities living there: Tulu, Konkani, and Kannada, and they've been living there for hundreds of years. But there has never been this politics of one-upmanship. They learn to coexist, which is what Bharat is all about, and which is what I mean. Rule of law is another thing, but innately we are of the live and let live mindset,
True.
basically.
So I think we've had a wonderful session. Thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Ram Madhavji and India Foundation for giving us this platform and this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an engaging session. I kindly request the speakers to please remain on the stage for the felicitation. To honor us distinguished speakers, I would now like to invite Mr. Combe Carpentier, Distinguished Fellow, India Foundation, to felicitate Ms. Rupa Vasudevan, please. I'd now like to invite Ms. Neetu Garg, a founder of Sarathi Foundation, to felicitate Mr. Anil Antony. I'd also like to invite Mr. Swadesh Singh, Assistant Professor, DU, and Distinguished Fellow, India Foundation, to felicitate Mr. Anand Prasad. Mr. Swadesh Singh. I'd now like to invite Mr. Prakash Hegde, Mr. Rajesh Mysore, to felicitate Mr. Anand Prasad. Please welcome Mr. Prakash Hegde, accomplished ocean marathoner, to felicitate Mr. Apurv Kumar Mishra. Please invite Mr. Banu Prakash, CEO of Craftsmillan, a Mysore-based inlay artworks company, to felicitate Ms. Shafali Vaidya. I request the speakers to please gather for a quick moment for a photograph, please.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Please give us a moment while we rearrange the stage for the next conversation. That is Conquering Culture Wars. That is our upcoming discussion here at the 8th India Ideas Conclave, brought to you by the India Foundation and the WMG Group here in Bangalore. You've been a wonderful audience, and this has been a great conversation. And this will continue till 1:30. So please give us a moment while we rearrange the stage. Sir, you'll have to go and make sure the camera first. Aida?
Lovely. And we are good to go. If I could kindly request you to take a moment and remain seated as we will start our forthcoming session. And thank you for your patience. It did take us a minute to rearrange the stage. Right now, we have Conquering Culture Wars, our second presentation today, here on the third day of the 8th India Ideas Conclave. For this panel discussion, I'd like to welcome on stage Shri CR Mukunda, Sahasara Karyava at the RSS. Please join me in welcoming on stage Shri CR Mukunda. Thank you, sir. Please join me in welcoming back on stage Shri Suresh Prabhu, former Civil Aviation Minister and Chancellor at Rishihood University. Sureshji, welcome. Yes, please. Sureshji delivered our welcome address on day one, and it's great to see him back on stage. Please now join me in welcoming on stage Mr. Yoram Hazony, President of the Herzl Institute. Mr. Hazony, please join us on stage, sir. And chairing this panel discussion on conquering culture was Dr. Surya Prakash, former chairman of the Prasar Bharati and the vice chairman of the Executive Council of the Prime Minister's Museum and Library. Dr. Surya Prakash. Before we start, if I could request all our panelists to give us a quick sound check to make sure that we are able to hear you clearly, and then we could proceed.
Yes.
That's sounding great.
Is that
Sureshji?
okay?
Yes, sir. Sureshji, could we have you just give us a line, please?
Namaste.
Hello. Mukundaji, if we could just have you give us a
Yeah.
line. Yes, sir, you're
Namaste.
sounding good. Sureshji, could you give us a sound check? If you could just say something.
I'm very happy to be here.
Perfect. Sounds good. Dr. Surya Prakash, over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And since we are in Bangalore, I'll say Ellarigu Namaskara. And a 360-degree Namaskara. We have a very distinguished panel here, as you are all aware. Suresh Prabhu ji and Mukunda ji and Yoram Hazony ji. Wonderful to have you all on this panel. It's a very important discussion on conquering culture wars. I think this whole business of dealing with the culture wars of today are very important in democracies, because I do believe that this is my personal view, that there are a minority of people in democracies which are trying to set the agenda, and also to take on the majority or the majority point of view for whatever reason. And the consequence of that can be disastrous for our politics, social life, and so on. And that we have seen many a time. And in terms of electoral politics, since they constitute the elite and are in very key elite institutions, as we have seen in America recently, they create the impression that they are in control of the situation, but electoral results show otherwise. That has been the case in India as well over the last 10 years. So I think it's very important for us to discuss that. And culture is ideas, beliefs, customs of a particular society, and the social behavior and institutions, and of course, language and so on, which is passed on from generation to generation. And even though culture and civilization are two distinct entities, they are in many ways interchangeable. And therefore, I will say that from a civilizational point of view, India has had a very unique place. And I say this in the context of another important event which is going to happen day after tomorrow, when we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the adoption of our constitution. This is a very significant moment for India for various reasons. One of them, I will tell you, is a sheer survival of the constitution. Studies have shown that most constitutions die between the age of 15 to 19. The mean lifespan of a constitution in the world is 17 years. Infant mortality is pretty high. 7% of the constitutions do not survive their second birthday. Hence, our constitution deserves a big round of applause for its survival. The second very important thing, sir, as to why it has survived and grown and ensured the unity and integrity of India. Because as Dr. Ambedkar said in the Constituent Assembly, it is the flexibility that is injected into the Constitution. In fact, there are Western scholars, political scientists and others who sometimes take a dig at us because we have amended our Constitution 106 times. They say, what is this? But I say, given our plurality, multiplicity in very many ways, and so on, this is the Indian reality and this is our solution to our problems. And in fact, Jefferson had said, every nation, every generation constitutes a nation. So therefore, amendability of a constitution is very critical for the very longevity of that instrument. And therefore, I think we have adopted that. Even Mahatma Gandhi said, emendations, he likes man-made texts because they are open to emendations. And so what we have done is we have adopted both Mahatma Gandhi and Jefferson, and therefore we have this flexibility both in terms of our federation. Ambedkar called it a flexible federation and so on. I won't go into that now. But the point is that all this has been possible. The central point is we have this constitution with a basket of rights for minorities and others, which is unique in the world. And having studied 80 constitutions across the world, I will assert that there is no other constitution that is etched in print with this whole basket of rights that we have in the Indian constitution for all citizens and particularly for minorities. And that is so because we are civilizationally democratic. That is the strength of this nation. And it goes back to the Rig Veda and many other texts. So the we are civilizationally democratic. We are civilizationally secular. Whatever meaning you attach to that word secular, I will say, yes, we will encompass all of that. And that is why we have this whole range of rights given to our citizens in our constitution. And that has been possible because of that civilizational background and strength. And as I said, that also percolates into our culture, very democratic culture that is there in the country. And but as I said, there is a minority of people, some of whom carry a book which is allegedly the Constitution of India and which has a red cover, signifying probably where the influence is coming from. And this negationism and wokeism is disturbing the whole constitutional arrangement in very many ways. But as I said, the civilizational strength, it comes from the Rig Veda, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, but the wise perceive it differently. Then you have another from the Maha Upanishad, Ayam Niji Paroveti Ganana Laguchetasam Udara Charitanam Tu Vasudaiva Kutumbakam. This is mine, that is yours. To think so is that of a small mind. Udara Charitanam, a large-hearted person will see the entire world as a family. So this is where, this is our past. And these are the ideas of India, which is inclusive, which is comfortable with plurality. That central idea you see in our constitution and in our way of life. And that is how we have moved on over the years. and you find it incorporated in our constitution and in our culture. But as I said, there is this minority of people, and many of them actually it goes back to the Nehruvian phase in our national life, especially post-independence and so on, where they never told us we had republics in this nation 3,000 years ago. The Lichavi Republic, Ambastas, Yodhayas, they were republic. They elected the Rajan. They elected the head of state. Now, there are many institutions across the world from non-republics. They are institutions existing in countries which are monarchies in a sense and who are lecturing us. So that is why we have to take note of this. So therefore, the critical part of what I'm saying is that our comfort with diversity and our comfort with a liberal way of life, and this is what has passed on to us in terms of our culture and so on. And we have a very distinguished panel here who I would want them to talk about this journey of ours and the current problems we are facing and we have faced in this journey of 75 years post-independence, dealing with many of these issues and that negationism, trying to make us feel that there was nothing in the past. In fact, in school, they never told me there were republics in India. There was, in fact, the Ambedkar talks of this in 1949 in the Constituent Assembly, where he says parliamentary practices that were there. There was voting rules and quorum and what have you. Ambedkar discusses that. But we were not taught this in schools when I was in school, nor is it being taught today. So I think this is a correction that must happen. Much of this has happened because of a certain variety of wokeism that prevailed in the past and that continues to prevail today, which wants us to forget our past and not have respect with that thing. So with these opening remarks, I would now request Suresh Prabhu ji to make his presentation.
So firstly, I really want to congratulate India Foundation, the team led by Ram Madhav, the event curated by Rami in such a magnificent way. So I'm really happy to be here and thanks to the chair, who is also a distinguished scholar as well as a great journalist. And I'm sure we'll hear more articulated views from Adharaniya Mukundaji soon. So just firstly, we are discussing this very important issue of culture wars. Firstly, we thought the wars are part of history. Till recently, when the wars erupted again. But we forget that history itself is a cause of war. Because we want to forget history, or you want to misinterpret history. And that's the cause of war. And that's the war that we call as cultural war. If you see the world in turmoil all over, the reason is we want to misinterpret so many real facts of life that have happened to us for several centuries in some countries' case, for sure, for some more longer time for others. And now that's come to fore. So if you see the last century was actually decolonization century. You saw so many countries becoming free. The colonial powers had to retreat. But colonization of land happened. Decolonization of land happened. But decolonization of mind never happened. Those who had occupied territory, they went away. But they still want to occupy the mind space. And that's a problem. Because a country like India, or if you go to many civilizations, each civilization had a unique characteristic. It had richness. It had versatility. And all of that, suddenly you want to forget and say, no, no, this never existed. And therefore, you are a completely a person, a civilization, a society, as we see from our eyes, from the eyes of those who colonized or those who are left over, the colonial tendencies into those territories which they left. So if you try to do that, obviously there has to be a conflict because reality is different and what you want to tell us as an alternate reality is completely different issue. So why you see the war today suddenly? Because after decolonization, you saw a lot of calmness. People have accepted that now we have become free, we'll operate our own governments. But that was actually a calm before storm. Because till that time, people are just trying to reconcile to the new reality. Oh, we are now the masters of our own destiny. We can rule our own country. Then realization came that we can now manage our governments, but we are asked to forget our heritage. So those who came and plundered our wealth, luckily, could never take away our spiritual strengths. That survived, which gives us the ability to understand the reality from our own perspective. And therefore, today, what you see as culture war suddenly erupting, not true. If you look at volcano, suddenly you see the lava coming out. Does it mean volcano never existed? Volcano always there. But the eruption happened now, the lava is coming out. So this separation of reality, trying to eradicate the cultural cause of our own country and many other countries in the world, Africa, Latin America, is the root cause of what you see and what you call as cultural wars. Wars are fought on battleground for territories, for occupying something. But they can easily be, you can actually withdraw from the war. Trump has said he wants to end all the war. I wish him all the best. Let him actually end the wars. But those wars can be ended. But what about those wars which you are trying to rewrite history or you want to rephrase the reality? How can that be never be over unless those who are trying to push this agenda retreat on their own? And that's the war. So I'm very sure that the soul of any civilization is why the civilization exists. And in our culture, we believe that soul, mind, and body, if it is not aligned to one another, there is bound to be some sort of a disturbance. And that's why we practice yoga to believe that we can bring all three together at the same time. So here, to end this culture wars, I think we should focus on the soul of that particular civilization.
Yeah.
Let's not try to touch and kill the soul. Soul cannot be killed. That's what our belief is. That soul always goes away. The body dies. But soul can never die. So our civilization has survived despite the fact that we have probably the only civilization somewhere wiped out, which I mentioned in the inaugural session, like Maya civilization, like Incas. And they were far, far developed. And they were called unadulterated civilization because they were not touched by outsiders. They just grew on their own. They had a counting system which world didn't know, rest of the world at that particular time. Of course, we had discovered at that time a concept of zero. But point I'm saying is, today we are facing this crisis because we are actually not focusing and trying to really keep the soul of that civilization alive. And I hope we succeed in doing that. Thanks to our great spiritual strength, we have still been able to alive on that. So I think wherever you want, any civilizational values, if they can be tried to be eradicated, at least in our case, it never happened. What I was saying was, we have so much of only, probably the only country which has been invaded several times, again and again by different invaders. But still we survived. And why we survived? Our religion survived, our civilization survived, our culture survived because that spiritual strength. So I think we'll fight for that, not in the streets, but definitely we'll fight for our own survival because if that goes away, we are lost. And you mentioned Mahatma Gandhiji. Gandhiji had said, if the salt loses saltiness, can you call it a salt? So if we lose our civilizational, it is in our DNA and we lose it, can we call ourselves that civilization? So I hope we succeed in doing that. As I said, I would like to hear articulated views, so I will stop here. And thank you, and also my other colleagues for really bringing in this into the debate. Thank you very much.
Mukunda ji.
So, about this subject, I would treat it in three ways. One is at the theoretical level, another at practical, when it comes to practically how to conquer. Third is the mindset which is required. Before that, I would start. Yesterday, when I was flying from Gorakhpur to Bangalore, in the flight, in the pouch, there was the menu card where there was an advertisement of a soft drink, which was the tagline was cool yet cultured. So I was started thinking what it meant. That is what the advertiser wants to message. Is being cool can't be cultured, or it's whether it is difficult to be cool and cultured at the same time. So when we think about cultural wars or battles, mostly we think about the religious identities or civilizational things or political ideologies like that. But there are some other dimensions also. It is generation also, what we now call it as Generation Z. What they believe as culture, or I think culture stems from the values which in they believe, maybe temporary, or what we can say, the Generation Z or Generation Alpha, what they think as the values may differ with my generation also. So it may be generational, it may be ideological, political, religious, civilization. So when it comes to cultural, but it's not only about the identities with religion and political. It may be generation also. This is one thing I wanted to bring to the audience. Second thing, when we think it in a theoretical way, when culture, as I said, it stems from value. And what I believe in, one of our philosopher from Mysore, he has explained it in a beautiful sentence. Professor M. Hiriyanna. While facts are comprehended, values are realized. So, if I believe in some values, which I think it's good for myself or for the world, which is superior values, which are noble values, that should conquer. Who have to conquer the war of culture? The good of the whole world should conquer it. The idea of goodness that should conquer. To make it, this is at the theoretical level, it should conquer. But when it comes to practical thing, how many people are there? It comes to demography. How many people are there who believe in, as Shafalaji was saying in the last session, Udara Charitanana or Vasudeva Kutumbakam? That should conquer the war. Otherwise, there is no future for our mankind. So, if that idea, that value, that belief have to conquer, how many people who believe in these values or in these cultural things exist on this earth? If it comes to India also, it all boils down to numbers. So I would say practically, those who believe in these values, in this culture, they should be in large numbers. I would take 2-3 minutes to explain it. Because if somebody thinks that my identity matters more and it doesn't align with the people who are in large numbers or in majority. I'm not talking about majority, minority in religious sense, but those who believe in goodness of the whole world, that the idea who believe in large number in that goodness, the person who identifies himself other than it, and he wants to put it or make it his idea or his identity more important, that will create tension. For example, in a later manner, if everybody sitting here decides that we will have lunch at 1 o'clock, it is more required. Yeah. So if somebody thinks I will have it 2 o'clock, session is going on, and he will come and sit here taking lunch, it's okay. But if he comes sit here in my place and start eating, that will create tension. So in our shastras, in our scriptures, there is a very beautiful two words which I heard from a great scholar. It talks about Kendriya Dharma and Parsha Dharma. Both are dharmas only. Yes, there is a space, there is a time who thinks that I am different, my value is different. But if we start asserting it, that will create battles, that will create into wars. Because though value is a very subjective matter, when we live in communities or when we live in large societies, it also becomes transsubjective matter. That is, not only 20 people believe, maybe 100 people believing, it will be lakhs and crores of people started believing it. It is right or wrong, it's the second thing. But when the communities start asserting what happened in uh, England or in many places, that was the problem. Those who are believing, this is our belief because of religious reasons. We have to assert it on the others. There comes this, what I said, the Kendriya Dharma and Parsha Dharma. Yes, you have your belief, but you have to manage it. I was reading a book by some Asho monk who was written about it. He has called it as identity trap. Even he uh, says that it's identity synthesis, because some people will get into identity trap many times for political reasons, for religious reasons. People will be there will be identity synthesis, the process of synthesizing the identity, that will create tensions. That's what the why these wars are happening, in my view, because of it. So how to manage it at theoretical level? As I said, even our great rishi munis and scholars have also thought about it, and there are so many scriptures available. Though I'm not well versed in any of the shastras, it's a, I will not even say it's a borrowed knowledge, it's a borrowed information what I am putting now. There is a book called Ishta Siddhi, by one written by or it has been translated to English by one of the scholars, in which the author it's a commentary on a work by a great scholar called Vimuktanand, in which the author discusses about the khyati. Khyati doesn't mean fame. The how the things, whether living or non-living things, present to this world, where he categorizes it to three, this one: akhyati, anyatha khyati, atma khyati. I will not go into details, but this atma khyati, it's not It's more about what we can say. It's about perception or the ideas where myself, how I present to the world, it will differ as Shafalaji or Apurva was discussing in the last session. You have space and time for everything, but how to manage it? If it is different from the majority, if it is different from the Kendra Dharma, how to manage the Parsha Dharma? So you can have it, but you have to align with the others. If your group, or as I said, it's a trans-subjective. If 100 people think that we are different and we have our own beliefs from the other 1,000 people and we'll battle it, their war starts. So our Shastras, this one has discussed about, as I said, in that Ishtasiddhi also, in that work, how to manage our Atma Khyati. That is how we present to this world. It has to be managed. It has to be aligned with the others also. So today, as I said, cultural war, not only about, there are so many things. Everything it has becoming a war, whether it is environmental issues, climate change, or fertility issues, or race, or immigration. And if it comes to India, about cow, beef, or Ayodhya, Mathura, Kashi, everything. It's becoming a battle because people who believe in global good or noble values, they have been confronted by some section of our society who doesn't care for it. So practically when it comes, as I said, and the person sitting here, he is expert in, or he has gone into so much of research into demography of our country. I would say everything boils down to how many people exist on this earth or in India who believe in these noble thoughts or noble values, or these cultural values which are most required for the whole world. So I would end here. This is the what we can say, the this is the requirement of these times. I would say those people who believe in global good, they have to assert. Then only they can conquer the war. Otherwise, you'll be confronted with values or beliefs which are not for the global values or global good. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yoramji, it's your turn.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to Ram Madhav and to everyone at the India Foundation. It's a great honor to be here. It's a great honor for my country, for Israel, to have a small delegation included in your important deliberations. Look, I have to be frank. I think it's been a little bit difficult to spend 2 full days talking about branding Bharat, because branding as an exercise that we all participating in here, it's a joyful, optimistic kind of an exercise. We hear many different people. Almost all the speakers talk about the brilliant future, and these are sentiments that that I share. If anyone were to ask me, no one asked me, but if somebody put me on one of these branding panels and said, "What kind of branding do you think we should have for India?" I would have said, "Brilliant Bharat, brilliant Bharat." And I'm not saying that to flatter. I'm saying that from the heart, as an admirer. That what is it really that for 2 days you've been talking about? Brilliance in science, brilliance in spiritual contributions to the world, a brilliant future. I think it works well. I'm in favor of it. So there, I contributed something to the good feeling, and if anybody wants any more of my help in that, I'd be happy to contribute. But our job on this panel and on the next panel is not to make people feel good. Our job is to talk about the obstacles and the challenges, and that's also crucial in branding. I mean, Coca-Cola. If Coca-Cola sits down to discuss its brand, they begin by talking about the rivals. They say, what's a market survey? We have Pepsi competing. We have all this competition, and that we haven't done so much. And in fact, I think that has made the discussion in many ways very difficult. I would say that the atmosphere of the last 2 days, in which, more or less, the feeling is there are no enemies, there are no rivals, there are no really big dangers. The future is blue skies. The future is open. We can be friends with everyone. We've heard that from a number of speakers, that we can be aligned with everyone. We can be aligned with China and America and Israel and Iran. We can be aligned with everyone. But I feel like I've been here before. I feel like I've heard all of this before, and I don't mean to be insulting, because like I say, I feel like I'm a friend. But I think that if we could enter a time machine and go back to let's say Tony Blair in the late 1990s and his branding, Cool Britannia. He's going to change Britain from an old oppressive empire that people resent, and change it into something open and young and future oriented and cool. And all of these feelings are feelings that you can feel here 30 years later. But I would like to ask, because I think it's the responsible thing to do, what happened to cool Britannia, to all of those good feelings, to the worldview where Britain could be friends with everyone, that it had to be enemies to no one. So now it's 25 years later, almost 30 years later, and you could make a very strong case that, and many of my friends in Britain, they do make this case. You could make a very strong case that in the 25 years since Tony Blair rebranded Britain, that the United Kingdom has destroyed itself. Right? That's not me speaking. If you talk to nationalists or religious people or conservatives on the right in the UK, they would tell you Britain has destroyed itself. How did this happen? How did you go from all of this good feeling and openness that we've been hearing the last couple of days to a country which is feels like it's on the verge of irreparable disaster? And the answer is, this takes us to the topic of wokeism or woke neo-Marxism. The answer is that while we here, or they in Britain, or in America and other countries, in Israel, in my country, we had a similar phenomenon, while the business people and the intellectuals are busy imagining an open world where everyone's going to cooperate with us, everyone's going to like us, no one's going to hate us, competition is going to be friendly competition. While that's going on, we tend to forget that there are people, many people, who spend their time trying to figure out how to destroy whatever it is that we're trying to brand as a positive thing. All right, and in fact, the way that this works, if you follow the development of the woke neo-Marxist ideology in the universities in America and Europe, if you follow it, you'll see that their goal is precisely whatever is successful about Britain, whatever is great about Britain or America or Israel, or India, whatever is great and successful, that's precisely the thing that's going to be attacked. So the woke is the anti-branding. Now, this is an ideology. It's very well developed at this point. There are thousands and thousands of professors at universities in all of the democratic nations who spend their time, they're paid salaries often by the government, they're paid a full-time salary to do nothing other than to think, what can we do to hack the good feeling and the liberalism and the good branding and the strengthening of this country, and to prove to everyone that everything that was strong and good about this country is actually evil and deserves to be destroyed. Now, I don't mention Marxism only in order to, for name calling. That's not of interest to me. I mention Marxism because the original Marxist idea was explicitly revolutionary, right? You all familiar with this, that Marx believed that the working class, the proletariat, would overthrow and destroy the ruling classes and take charge in some kind of a utopian political maneuver. But the key was that the ruling classes had to be destroyed. That didn't work out so well for a simple reason, because it turned out that the working classes are more nationalist than they are Marxist. They love their country, and if their country goes to some trouble to help the working classes advance, then they're grateful and they love their country. So that didn't work. So neo-Marxism is a concoction where academic intellectuals said, okay, the working class is not going to be our friend. So who do we have who can work on destroying the country, achieving that overthrow, achieving the revaluation of everything that was good and destroying it? Family, nation, tradition, religion, country, man and woman, anything that was good and sacred and holy. Our goal is to achieve Marxist revolution, but we're not going to do it with the proletariat. We're going to do it in another way. Marcuse is explicit in his essays in the late 60s and early 70s, right? And his argument is simple: the proletariat won't help us. What we need is an alliance between the university, the professors who can understand the need to destroy this oppressive country, its evil history, its evil religion, its evil social ways to destroy it. We need professors, and they need to be allied with street fighters, with people who will go to the streets and cause so much disruption that people will become afraid to disagree with the professors. Now, Marcuse thought that the alliance would be intellectuals from the West plus third world, blacks and other minorities. Since then, there's been most of that has happened, but there's been a little bit of a change. At this point, I would say that the woke neo-Marxists in the West have discovered that the most effective street fighters that they have are Muslim supremacists. The most effective ally that Western neo-Marxist professors have is Muslim neo-supremacy. Muslim supremacist organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, I want to be clear, this is not an anti-Muslim speech. I'm sure that the majority of Muslims in most countries are patriots. They want to live in peace with their neighbors. But it is a fact that as we watch the development of the woke in country after country, there is some proportion of the Muslim population. I can't take maybe it's 25%. I don't know what the numbers are. But there's some percentage that are not looking to become patriotic part of their own country. And they're willing to take part with the woke in overthrowing everything that's of value, everything that's of greatness and success about the country in which they live. Why? Because they believe that the future is Muslim, not Christian, not Jewish, not Hindu, not liberal, but Muslim. All right. So this hack, it's a philosophical, but also a political hack of liberalism. If Marcuse were sitting in the room for the last 2 days, he would say, great, Bharat is ready for the revolution. Listen to them. They think it's all blue skies. They have no enemies. They talk about inclusion. They talk about freedom. They talk about rights. They talk about diversity being our strength. Right? And I don't have a problem with diversity being your strength as long as you understand that diversity is your strength up until the moment that your country disintegrates, like Britain is disintegrating right now, and then it's not your strength anymore. So the issue that I think that we need to face is not, I don't in any way mean to take away from the lovely dreams and aspirations of India. Anything I can do to contribute, I would want to. I feel like a friend, but I think that there's a naivete about this liberalism and diversity and inclusion, which it has basically destroyed Britain. A series of governments for 25 years have been unable to make changes in immigration, in trade, in anything else that the general public feels that they need in order to get out of the woke trajectory of destruction. America is, look, most of you know this. For the last 8 years, Americans have felt that they are on the verge of civil war. And this isn't a joke. They still feel they're on the verge of civil war. They believe that their country has never been as divided, that people have never hated each other as much as since the Civil War, since the 1860s. And India, if it's going to avoid this, has to learn from these experiences. You have to learn what is the weakness of all of this liberalism and thinking in economic terms and including everybody and having no allies because everyone is our friend. We're allied with everyone. There are people who have figured out how to hack that. There are people who have figured out how to make use of your good will and good spirit to destroy you. And they're going to try. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, some of the points you have made are really very disturbing for democracies across the world. Whatever is good has to be destroyed. In America, UK, India, wherever, all the democracies. And this must be really a very small coterie of intellectuals and so on in some universities and media and so on, isn't it? That is exactly what it is in terms of numbers.
Look, everyone, for decades, the answer, if someone would say, let me give obvious examples. If you're not familiar with these books, you probably are, but look them up. In 1987, Alan Bloom wrote a book called The Closing of the American Mind. In 1991, Dinesh D'Souza wrote a book called Illiberal Education. Both of these books, the first written by a Jew, the second by a Hindu. Actually, Dinesh is Christian, but he's Indian, so you should claim him. Both of these books laid out the entire trajectory of how the universities were going to be first taken over by, the word woke didn't exist back then, but the neo-Marxist revolution, how it would first take the universities and then use the education system to take over the schools, the media, the Hollywood, the government bureaucracies, in short, every institution which has, and the courts, of course, every institution that relies on some degree of intellectual, of ideas, where ideas are important to what's going on. Every such institution, they argued, is going to be in the end taken over by the universities, because the universities are teaching the students to hate these existing institutions, and they're teaching them how to go out and take them over, how to destroy them from the inside. Now, for all these decades, most people said, well, this is ridiculous. I'll tell you exactly what my conservative friends, that for decades, they said, okay, that's college. They'll finish college. They'll go into the real world. They'll join a business. They'll see reality and they'll grow up. And the opposite happened. Exactly the opposite happened. That They went out into the world. They went to work at the New York Times or at Princeton University or in the American Army or in Hollywood. And instead of growing up, they waited until they were strong enough. And then in the summer of 2020, that was the Cultural Revolution in American Britain.
Yes.
The summer of 2020, they demanded change, and the entire liberal establishment, thousands of institutions, collapsed before them. So it's not a small number of people anymore. Now it's a major movement.
I think it's just going to be a tough proposition in dealing with this culture, woke culture. But if we don't, then I think all democracies are going to be in grave danger. And that's going to be a very sad day for all of us. But I must say that the India Foundation stands as a testimony to fight wokeism. And it's very important. It's very important that we have established an institution of this sort, and this is going to play a very critical role in India, and I'm sure globally, now that we have all these connections with you and many other scholars across the world. And the other thing is that this conclave itself is, in a sense, a testimony to our resolve to stand up for our values, our democracy, our traditions, our faith in plurality and in fairness as a nation. And I think this is very, very important, and it's really a proud moment for us for having an institution like this. And Ram Madhav ji must take all the credit for having set it up. And
I just want to make one observation.
Yes.
It was a very brilliant point made by Yoram. The big reconciliation that has to happen between people like Yoram, Walter, and others, and those of us like Mukunda ji, we are all, is about the lingo.
Yeah.
What we talked about pluralism, we treat all religions as equal, we have no enemies, everybody is friend, will appear to a Western liberal as talking his language. The liberal will think that yeah, the Hindutvasis are actually my friends.
Yeah.
Conservative thinks that they are talking the liberal language. Because this is exactly what a liberal says there. No difference in religions, you have to treat everybody as. So, some reconciliation, some understanding between what we mean when we say that we are, we respect diversity, unless you emphasize, but there is an innate unity in this country. That unity is the cultural unity. Respect that unity, then that diversity. So that is where we have to be a little careful about how we understand each other's point. Otherwise, we are considered liberals by a conservative in America, and we consider conservatives are our friends.
Before I round up, I'll just cite a tweet by Mukunda ji where you have referred to what Mohan Bhagwat ji said. One of his speeches.
Stops.
If there's a doctor out here, could we request you to kindly come to the front, and requesting all of you to kindly move out and give the space to the attending. Please settle down and move out, please. Requesting all bystanders to kindly move back. Kindly please move back and allow people attending to. Yes. Could I please request everybody to kindly remain seated? The situation appears to be under control. Once again, requesting all of you to kindly take your seat. Yes. Thank you for your concern. Once again, requesting all of you to remain seated. And yes. We would now like to come to the end of this session, and I'd like to thank Dr. Surya Prakash for his concluding notes and for Ram Madhavji for your comments on this panel discussion. We'd like to felicitate our panelists. I'd like to first felicitate Sri Mukundaji, requesting Ms. Rami Madhav, distinguished fellow here at the India Foundation, curator of the India Ideas Conclave, to present Mukundaji with a small memento of artwork done in the Mysore art style. Thank you, Mukundaji. We would now like to felicitate Mr. Yoram Hazony. I'd like to call on stage Shri Bharat Lal Meena, retired IAS officer Karnataka and co-founder of the Best IU Andhra Pradesh, to felicitate Mr. Hazony. Mr. Yoram is joining us back on stage. Ms. Shri Bharat Lal Meena felicitating Mr. Hazony. Thank you, sir. We'd now like to felicitate Shri Suresh Prabhu. I'd like to call on stage distinguished fellow at the India Foundation, Ms. Prabha Rao. Ms. Rao, if we could have you kindly join us on stage and felicitate Suresh Prabhuji. Thank you, ma'am. Please join me in welcoming on stage Shri Apurv Mishra, consultant with the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, to felicitate Shri Surya Prakash. Thank you. If I could request all our panelists to kindly stand for a quick picture together, please. Ready to go? Let's give a round of applause to all our panelists for the session. And now over to Meenakshi for the concluding session here at the 8th India Ideas Conclave.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we near the finale of the 8th India Ideas Conclave, we will now have a concluding discussion on a panel on the topic Challenges to Brand India. To chair this session, we are honored to have Major General Dhruv C. Katoj, Director, India Foundation, onto the stage, please. Please welcome the chair of this session, Major General Dhruv C. Katoj, Director of India Foundation. To join this panel discussion, please join me in welcoming the esteemed panelists, Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, Member, Union Public Service Commission, Mr. A.B. Mathur, Distinguished Fellow of India Foundation, and Mr. P.S. Raghavan, Chairman, National Security Advisory Board. Please join me in once again welcoming our distinguished panelists. Now over to the chair, Major General Dhruv. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
We'll be finishing at 1:20. Sorry? We'll be finishing early. Okay. Right. We'll be finishing early. Okay, right.
What do you say, sir?
Namaskar, everybody. Namaskar. 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 Yeah. It's been 3 days now. Today's the third day, and we've had a fabulous discourse starting from day before yesterday, and on today, onto building brand Bharat. And now in this concluding session, we'll be looking at certain challenges. I had prepared a structured speech, but then I thought, in the spirit of what we are doing, I'll change what I was earlier going to say. And I will confine myself to 2 thoughts before I give it over to our very distinguished speakers. One, if you went back 10 years, just 10 years, 2014, and you took a group of 100 universities and took 100 students at random from each university and asked them what is the meaning of the word, or have you heard of the phrase from the Maha Upanishad, Vasudev Kutumbakam? And it would be surprising if we got just a handful of people who knew what the phrase meant. Today, in every corner of India, that is the change which has taken place in 10 years. In every corner of India, in our schools, our universities, everywhere, it has become a common phrase, Vasudev Kutumbakam. It has become something which we use in our everyday lives. That is one aspect of change which has taken place. The second, when we look at, again, going back to 2014 and prior to that, if somebody wanted to say, we want to introduce a yoga curriculum in our school, that person would have been frowned upon. You know, the idea would have been considered outrageous. Today, yoga is not only an accepted function as far as India is concerned, it has got worldwide acceptance. I think this idea of change is something very important which we need to understand. One. The second thought which I wanted to just share with you. I travel very regularly now on the metro between Gurgaon and Delhi. And when you come to those junctions, and if you get out, whether it is at Rajiv Chowk or any other place on the metro route, you will find swarms of people, thousands of them moving at random. And when a casual observer looks at it, it is a sight, it is a very overawing sight. What is happening? It looks chaotic. But on deeper reflection, you find everything is in order. Those thousands of people who are moving within a period of 5 minutes would have got through a security barrier, they would have got through a security check, they would have been through a metal detector, they would have got their ticket electronically examined, they would have boarded their train, and they would be on their journey. And similarly, on the way out, the same ticket which they use, the money, whatever they had spent for the journey, would have been automatically deducted. This is the digital Bharat, the Viksit Bharat. And this journey of ours, in some sense, we are trying to rediscover our roots, our Sanskriti from thousands of years back, getting back to what we were, understanding what we were. But keeping our feet very firmly on the ground, we are now moving towards a modern Bharat. We are moving towards a modern Bharat, a Viksit Bharat. And that journey is going to be seamless and endless. While keeping our feet very firmly grounded in what we were, we are looking at a future world, a world where we have a rightful place in a Viksit Bharat and where we can be the world leaders. But there will be many challenges on the way. And to discuss those challenges over the next 30 to 35 minutes, we have three very distinguished speakers. We have with us Sri A.B. Mathur, a former secretary in the Prime Minister's office, and now a member of the National Security Advisory Board. We have General Raj Shukla, a former General Officer Commanding in Chief of the Army Training Command, now a member of the UPSC. And we have with us Sri A.P.S. Raghavan, a former diplomat who's been our ambassador to Moscow and other places, and also the chairman of the National Security Advisory Board. All three are very accomplished in their own ways. They are strategic thinkers and intellectuals in their own right. And I will request each of them to give their views over the next 10 to 12 minutes each. May I start with you, Sri Mathur? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At the beginning, I would like to compliment Sri Ram Madhavji for organizing this conclave and giving us chance to discuss a very important issue of challenges to brand India. Now, I would like to say that India's internal security and external security is critical in shaping India's brand India, what the concept of brand India. We have to see that these two issues, this thing. So I'd like to very briefly talk about external security and how external powers try to blame us for our security issues and try to create this thing. And I would also like to very briefly touch upon the narratives which are created against India or against creation of the brand India. This issue has been discussed in the past. In the previous session also it was discussed. Yesterday also it was discussed. But I'd like to give some concrete examples how things are distinct. So coming to the external security environment, we have in the neighborhood particularly, we have China, which is a major threat or major issue for us. We have direct threat from China. They have occupied 38,000 square kilometers of India in Aksai Chin. They covet 90,000 square kilometers in Arunachal Pradesh. They have given Chinese names to 32 places in Arunachal Pradesh. They have this thing, and they will now force sites like Google and others to take these names and then later on claim that these are the Chinese places. So that the other concern is that how they are trying to encircle India by increasing their influence in all the neighboring countries. Whether you take Pakistan is of course a client state of China. If you take Myanmar, if you take Bangladesh, if you take Nepal, Prime Minister of Nepal is likely to go to China in another 10 days. He's under tremendous pressure from the Chinese to have to operationalize the BRI. Let's see what happens. So we have this issue of concern and how we tackle this, how do we come out. Other issue that I would like to mention briefly is that of terrorism, which is emanating from mainly from Pakistan and Afghanistan, Pakistan area, if we say so. We have been suffering from it for many, many years, in spite of the fact that we have given very resolute, strong message to Pakistan on the terrorism issue, but they continue to indulge into that. Other neighboring countries, unfortunately, if I may say, like for example, the recent development in Bangladesh, where we had a pro-India government, unfortunately, it has been replaced by, at least as of now, somewhat anti-India government. Let us see whether it continues the same way or whether there is some change in the thinking of the government there, and then we have, and I'm sure we'll have perhaps better relations with Bangladesh also. Other countries like Myanmar, again very destabilized. You have China supporting ethnic armed organizations, giving weapons to them, at the same time giving weapons to army also. So both of them are fighting. So we have. So my point is that the whole external environment of India is kind of unstable. At least these 2-3 countries that we can think of. So that kind of forces us to take a very strategic, very balanced view, balanced look at the situation, how it is going to affect us. Similarly, there are some forces within India which affect our security concerns and which affect our security and thereby creation of the brand India image. And they are very interested groups. Like you have, for example, issue of the EVM. You will find that there are certain groups which will come up with the EVM issue at the time of election to show that the democracy in India is not perfect. We know that the democracy, we have just had elections in the recent past, both at the national level, at the state level, and a state like Jammu and Kashmir. I can't recollect any instance where there was no violence in the elections in Jammu and Kashmir, except the last elections. The most peaceful elections, and a lot of credit goes to Sri Ram Madhavji also, because he was the one who was kind of very actively involved in the elections there. Then we have issues of the radicalization, how different groups are trying to radicalize our youth, and in the previous session this issue was discussed, and I totally agree with the previous speaker from friend from Israel. There's a kind of education being imparted both within India and abroad. And I know of a recent case of a seminar in one of the most prestigious universities in America, where India was discussed, and then it was kind of decided that there's no place for India. That the West can do whatever they want to do. If they want to attack any country, if they want to kill anybody, it is fine. But countries like India have no such right. They have no place on the high table. So this is the kind of thing that is being this thing. There are various other issues internally. We have the issue of illegal migrants. Again, all externally promoted. So all these issues are externally promoted. So we have had insurgency movements in the past. So these are all. What I would like to highlight is the creation of narratives. That is what is perhaps very important. We have seen very recently case of Bangladesh, where a duly elected government was shown to be unrepresentative, authoritarian. Even the elections which were held in 2008 were shown that they were not free and fair. The government was removed, and the scenario was created that everybody kind of forced to accept that the mob was allowed to change the government, and everybody has accepted it. Efforts have been made to do a similar kind of thing in India also. They have failed. We know all about that. Those efforts have not succeeded. China and Pakistan always join hands as far as the creation of narratives is concerned. In case of Galwan, China took help of Pakistan, and I understand that a company in Kochi, they detected that all the Twitter handles, all the Telegram was actually originated from Pakistan, were originating from Pakistan against India on the Galwan issue. They have been promoting Nepal for raising this border issue. Yes, an issue which is a very simple issue of Kalapani and Susta has been enlarged to create lot more of areas, and again trying to put the blame on India. I mean, I can go on to give you a number of such instances where we are actually, Ambassador Raghavan knows about it, that a particular interview given by a right-wing leader has been deleted from the YouTube. And just to say that this will affect elections in America. That is the kind of thing that India has been accepting refugees from all over the world. We have accepted refugees from Tibet. We have accepted refugees from Bangladesh in 1971. We have accepted refugees from Myanmar very recently. But blame is put that CA, NRC, India is not willing to accept refugees. Rohingyas, India is not willing to. So that is the kind of narrative which is being created. Very interesting. Very recently, a researcher from America approached me, and she asked me whether you accept that Indo-Assam war, Indo-Nagaland war, Indo-Myanmar war were wars between these two, and whether India has won all those wars. This was news to me. So this is the kind of scenario that this researcher was from America, from a very prestigious university. So PM Modi is always called as right-wing Hindu nationalist leader. Sometimes, for good measure, they add fascist also. So this is the language that is used against PM, against BJP. This is standard. This thing which is used here. So how to face these challenges? One more challenge I would like to mention. Unfortunately, our own political parties, they do not distinguish between the national security issues and the political issues. Like, for example, in Galwan, they kept on challenging the army's version, undermining the strength, undermining the whole institution of army. Whatever others were saying, they were willing to accept that. In 1998, when nuclear explosions took place from India, Congress, which was part of preparations for this thing, nuclear explosion won't take place overnight. They questioned the whole thing, that why they opposed it. So that is another issue that for political purposes, national security issues are sidelined. So coming to how to handle it. Of course, one of the challenges which has been discussed in the past also is to predict the challenge itself. What is going to be the challenge for our creation of the brand India? It's itself is difficult. How do we predict it? To my mind, we have to study our adversaries. We have to study the non-state actors, see what they are likely to do, how they are going to this thing. Perhaps very close this thing leads to this thing. For that, we have to have strategic culture, and Ambassador Raghavan has been working on that for a long time. He's still working on that. Unfortunately, there's a very small group in India which is involved in strategic thinking. It has to be enlarged. We have to have more strategic thinking. We have to have more involvement right from the school and college days, where the children understand what is national security, what is strategic thinking, that perhaps needs to be inculcated. We have to create our own narrative. So far, we have been kind of reacting to the narratives created by others. We have to create our own narrative. We have to tell our own story. We have to highlight the strength of our democracy. We have to highlight that we are capable of handling any issue, whether it is external or internal, in a very, very responsible way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I totally support your comments, especially as far as the narrative building is concerned, because I think still there is an element of weakness as far as the narrative building on our part is concerned. Now, may I request Janet Shukla for your remarks, please?
So, good afternoon, Namaskar. Well, for all the reasons that have been articulated over the last few days, it would appear to me that brand Bharat is indeed acquiring great salience and powerful resonance across the globe. You know, many years ago, I recall a piece in the media, I don't quite recollect which newspaper it was. It was entitled The Wallflower and the Dance of the Dinosaurs, likening India to this wallflower, whom the great powers of the day, the dinosaurs, USSR and USA, would not even ask for a dance. India today is heard with far greater attention. It is being wooed and vetted on the world stage. We are in many ways the geopolitical toast of the world. So there is much to celebrate about brand Bharat. But amidst the manifest euphoria, we must remain cognizant and vigilant to the many challenges to brand Bharat, to our prospective rise. And that would be my theme. So challenges in the domain of geopolitics and national security, for instance, because as India enters the big league in the international system, we're already the fifth largest economy, soon to be the third largest. In the view of some, the third most powerful country in the world. Now people are talking like that. So our strategic heft today may have begun to exceed that of Europe, as was alluded to yesterday. So in this big league, in the interplay between a declining hegemon USA, it is still a great power, powerful brand, declining nevertheless, a rising challenger India, and a very serious and sophisticated challenger, and the aspiring Vishwabandhu India. The competing brands, the competition will be intense, it will be sophisticated, it will be calibrated, it will be long term, and it will be technologically focused. So the challenges are increasing and growing as brand Bharat becomes resonant and powerful. And if we don't play our cards well, much that we are doing is good, we can discuss that. But in terms of sophistication, if we don't play our cards well, the consequences could be brutal. Because geopolitics is extremely unforgiving of those that are disrespectful or negligent towards national security. It spares nobody, not even the mighty United States of America. A couple of months back in Ukraine, there was a town that was surrendered, Advika. And now I'm quoting the CIA director, outgoing CIA director, William Burns. He said before they took the decision to surrender, I mean, the troops were there, the valor was there, the Ukrainians were prepared to fight, but they did an operational audit of 2 infantry brigades. One had 15 artillery rounds left, and the other had 44 mortar rounds left. We are talking of the mighty United States of America. American studies tell us that for a Taiwan contingency today, the Americans don't have 7 days of top-class precision missiles and munitions because they have neglected the military-industrial complex. They have neglected their statecraft. Kissinger had one piece of advice for his colleagues: never let Russia and China come together. It has been followed in the breach. So today you have CRIC, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, challenging American military power, fragmenting it across theaters, posing very difficult choices before American statecraft. Do you fight in 3 theaters or you do win in 1? Which one? So the point that I wish to make is, in the Indian context, while Vasudhaiv Kutumbakum is a very great and noble idea, we must also pay heed to the very wise words of Swami Vivekananda, who felt that the world is but a gymnasium where nations come to make themselves strong. So we need to reimagine our national security, the metrics of a hard power, in very smart, more productive, cost-effective, and deliverable ways. And there is a whole lot here that needs to be done. So a lot of promise and opportunity, a great moment for India. Equally, we need some very deft, astute, imaginative statecraft to secure Amrit Kal. So what could we possibly do? In all humility, there are so many things, but let me just focus on 5 to 6 suggestions, and they are just suggestions that span the domains of geopolitics, statecraft, national security, and deterrence. And another theme of mine is invest in deterrence so that you don't have to war fight. It is not wise to war fight, provided we invest in deterrence now, and it is very much possible. And this is for our collective consideration. So what are these points? One, what could we do, or could we do something in terms of complicating China's rise? Over the last 2 to 3 days, there seems to be consensus that the incoming Trump administration will be favorably disposed towards India. Trump's cabinet picks Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio, and Mike Waltz indeed seem to suggest so. There are still others like Elbridge Colby, who, while being extremely critical of some US allies, I mean, they call them pathetic dependencies, their words, not mine, have extolled India as a valuable autonomous partner. So how could we leverage this? A few examples: the 3 mechanisms of IDEX, ISET, and INDUS-X are working very well indeed. Some of you would have heard how Indian-enabled startups like Bharat Semi have recently inked a partnership with the DoD, US DoD, and the US Space Command for a semiconductor fab in India, and an extremely futuristic fab looking at national security, green technologies, and next-generation communications. Another Indian startup from Bangalore, Galax I, with some assistance from SpaceX, will deliver to us along the LAC by October 2025 SAR capacities for persistent surveillance. Now, if we had such persistent surveillance, perhaps Galwan might not have happened. So there is a whole lot of good which is happening under the US-India rubric. Could Quad become a green corridor to develop and share a wider range of deep strategic technologies? Things like AI, robotics. Somebody was talking of quantum yesterday. So there was talk yesterday, about how decoupling the American economy from China. There was also talk about the military-industrial complex. Now, in the military-industrial complex, I'm told in the intermediate range of military goods and services, the USA is dependent on some 10,000 Chinese companies. So could at least 100 of these companies be Indian? So in sum, it would seem to me that in the domains of technologies and supply chains, with some give and take on tariffs, there is much that US and India could do to bolster our deterrence with China and complicate its continued rise. Also, I mean, there's no time to elaborate on this, but may I just say so, that a technologically enabled Indian strategic military complex may be in the American self-interest. And we need nothing else from them, neither their blood nor their treasure, as we have proved. We must also acknowledge the other reality. The military defense burden of the power differential with China is $300 to $400 billion annually. That's a reality. So the only way to close this gap is by disrupting from the past surgically. And the good news is that the IDEX, this Innovations in Defense Excellence Mechanism, has created Indians' defense startups by the dozen. 114 AI, Third iTech, Skyroot, Galaxy, I could go on. Extremely talented, smart, masters of frugal engineering to meet our operational needs along the LAC, for instance, in INT, ISR, surveillance, autonomy, targeting. And they are capable of providing these capacities and speed and scale if we could surgically minimize the bureaucracies, give them orders. This is entirely possible. You know, and why this is so important. The US military's technological poise comes from its marriage between Pentagon and Silicon Valley. The Soviet military collapsed because Khrushchev's Zelenograd fizzled out. It didn't quite take off. Could Bangalore become the Silicon Valley for the Indian military? And I think it is eminently possible with a lot of stuff that has been done. And this, in concert with the robust operational balancing that has already been carried out, could ensure stronger deterrence along the LAC and allow the broader Sino-Indian relationship to flow and grow. At least not hold it hostage to periodic deterrence breakdowns along the LAC. You know, this cycle of a deterrence breakdown, the relationship freezing, and diplomacy coming in to bail out the deterrence failure, this has to be reversed. And it can be done with small measures like this. Point 3, we need to embrace the AI, autonomy, robotics, quantum combat food chain with far greater vigor and insurgence and urgency. If we do not do so, we are out of the game. Due to limitations of time, let me just say this. Proficiencies in this technology spectrum will define the future of power. The panoply of these technologies is already creating a new set of strategic haves and have-nots, not only in terms of technological proficiencies, but in terms of the geopolitics of AI and chips, as to how data centers are rewiring the global economy. Without chips, there are no cars, no refrigerators, but also no drones, not even any hypersonic missiles. Without chips, the manufacturing base will freeze. Without chips, you can't manufacture cars. Every domain, from intelligence to surveillance to targeting to logistics, war fighting and deterrence, depends on AI and chips. The game is also becoming one of talent and scarcities. China is getting its talent back from around the globe. Can we do so? Can we do something to retain talent? We'll have to focus on both these issues. It is also becoming an area of scarcities. Elon Musk says it is easier today to buy drugs in America than to get access to GPUs, which are these high-end AI chips. The associated supply chains are hugely complicated, necessitating some long-term supply chain statecraft. Complications which India will have to think through with great clarity and wisdom if we are to survive in the big league. Point 4. A key reason why China has surged ahead of Western democracies, including India, is through the very commonsensical embrace which Mr. Akbar referred to yesterday of civil-military fusion to gain strategic military ascendancy, maximize national security outcomes. I'll just give you one quick example. I'm told the Politburo every 10 years looks at one technology. So 10 years back, they picked up a technology, batteries. Now, who in the world would pick up thing like batteries? But the Chinese did it in the university ecosystem. They designed, I'm told, 450 courses on batteries, battery metallurgy, battery this, battery that, created a whole generation of people proficient in batteries. You know, graduates, postgraduates, PhDs, set up a university in central China for it, linked it to the PLA Academy of Military Sciences. Does it surprise you now that Chinese cars are pushing Volkswagen out of the German market? And these batteries go into your submarines, your missiles, your AD systems. So that is the way it works. We, unfortunately, all these years dissipated all our energies in wasteful civil military silos. We need an urgent reset, dipped in the source of our own civilizational wisdom. Saraswati, Lakshmi, or Durga Kamishran, how brilliantly put. Build centers of academic excellence, research, and learning, Saraswati, that create talent and wealth, Lakshmi, and use some of that Lakshmi to nurse calibrated instruments of power, Durga. You know, so of course, it has to be repurposed to modern security challenges. And here may I point out, our private sector will need also to step up the game. Look at our investments in R&D. America, $950 billion. Out of this, 750 comes from the private sector, only 200 from the government. China, $575 billion. India, $20 billion. unless we pick up the game in this regard, we will not survive in the big league. Point five, in just 2 more minutes. Point five is that we must revisit the rationale and metrics of our defense spending. With conflicts raging across the globe, geopolitics seems to have swiveled significantly to the hardball of national security. We in India may be in the midst of a very fortunate peace dividend. Please think, we may also be in a pre war era. We need to do two things. One is this optimization, innovation, civil military fusion, internal optimization, very much possible to create displacement anxiety in Beijing. Look at this Russia, $2 trillion economy. The US and the West, $40 trillion. Who's winning? Russia, because of all the smart stuff that they are doing. But equally, we'll need to enhance our defense spending thoughtfully. Thoughtfully, I'm saying, because come 2028, if push comes to shove, we should not be embarrassed by that Advika moment. So, this has to be done. Smart deterrence so that we do not have to war fight. In any case, a full-fledged fight with China when you are spending 1.98% of your GDP on defense will be a fool's errand. Yesterday, I have a small bone to pick with the economic minds. Yesterday, we had a galaxy of economic minds in this hall talking of $10 trillion, $12 trillion, and not a word about national security. National security, defense and national security must be woven into our economic tapestry, and not national security is an afterthought. That will not be wise. And the last point is that in doing so, I think we can create a framework of fail-proof deterrence over the next decade or two with a lot of reform, disruption, innovation. Now, these are just words, but they really need to be acted upon. Laser-focused leveraging of the opportunities that I alluded to. Cultural transitions, abandoning the tyranny of L1, embracing the concept of national champions. The whole world does it. We must do it. Root and branch reform of the DPPs. Yesterday a startup was telling me that he had joined a defense PSU. Why did he leave? Because whenever he asked what is the outcome, he was told, we are a process company. We only believe in processes. What about the outcomes? And with all this, some additional cost, fail-proof deterrence of China, in my humble view, is entirely possible. May I also add in conclusion that deterrence may be costly, but wars are costlier. If you don't believe me, ask the Ukrainians. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Raj. I think that has been very well put, especially your thoughts on deep strategic technology and that idea, that Bangalore can be the Silicon Valley for the Indian armed forces. I think that's very well taken. And now for the final speaker, Ambassador, can you share your thoughts on this issue?
Thank you very much. Let me start by thanking Sri Ramadhavji and the India Foundation for this excellent conclave, not only for inviting me, but also for bringing it down south. So many of us in the south, especially since my retirement and settlement in Bangalore, we feel that much of the debate takes place in North India to the exclusion of the thinking and aware population of the south. There is so much interest in this entire range of issues, not only in Bangalore, but in Bangalore, in Chennai, to Kochi and Hyderabad. Bring more of these debates down south and get the participation more of us in the south to these issues. So thank you very much for this. Now I realize that I'm the last speaker of the last session of a long conclave.
Before lunch.
So I know I must be short. And maybe I should be a little provocative as well if I have to hold attention. So I'll try to be both. Now we've had a fairly long discussion on the philosophical and the conceptual projection of brand India in the world. Our external affairs minister spoke about it. We also had a pretty broad-based discussion on the world order, where it's going, where it's not going, and what does it all mean for India. But I'd like to drill down today to a more narrow, micro study of how we project brand Bharat. How do we explain to the world why we are doing what we are doing? How do we explain to the world that the world looks different to us
in our geographical and strategic location than it does to others elsewhere in the world. And that is why we behave the way we behave. Now, the fundamental issue, of course, is that all our policies are anchored in our national goals and in our national ambitions. What do we look for? We look for rapid economic growth. We want equitable development. Of course, the two have to be reconciled in various ways, as we heard in the economic panel. We want to become a developed country by 2047. That's a goal that has been clearly articulated. So the points that we need to recognize, project, is that all our actions are in pursuit of these fundamental national goals and ambitions. Our behavior and our international actions flow from this fundamental national ambition. And I think criticism of what we do, questioning of what we do in many cases arises from an inability or unwillingness to understand this basic reality. And I'm afraid that inability or unwillingness extends also to many elements within our own country, within our media, within our academia, and of course abroad. So projecting this is an important part of projecting brand India. Second, a lot of discussion took place yesterday about the world order. But much of it eventually was about the world order post the World War. Now, that is a Western analytical framework. The Western world made the global order after World War II. And they want to cling to an analytic framework which is not relevant today. Post the Cold War, the strategic geography of various regions of the world has changed dramatically. There has been the rise of a number of middle powers, for want of a better expression, across continents, whose technological growth, economic strength, military power, and regional influence makes them feel that they should have a role in shaping the world order, or at least in participating in the shaping of a rules-based order. Now, what is a rules-based order? Post-World War II, the rules-based order was in fact what used to be called international law. The United Nations and its agencies, and a whole lot of the Bretton Woods institutions, of course, and later on the WTO joined it, and a whole lot of other institutions which basically maintain some modicum of political, economic, and technological order in the world. Now, those have broken down. In yesterday's discussion, I think our colleague from Sri Lanka talked about it. It's a world disorder today. Institutions have broken down, and we are really looking, if not at a restructuring, disruption of these institutions. This is where India has a role along with other middle powers. And again, this is something that has not been adequately recognized. And if it is not adequately recognized, we are not able to project what we are doing and why we are doing it. And if you want an example of this, look what happened recently. There was this procession of countries that went to Kazan, where a BRIC summit was being held. And it was an extraordinary mix of countries. You had Turkey, you had UAE, you had Indonesia, from different parts of the world, flocking to Russia. What were they trying to do? They were trying, in fact, to show their strategic autonomy in a world where they also want to have their own say. They didn't want to, they were hedging against a future US-China confrontation. Basically, this is what led them to do it, not love of Vladimir Putin or a sudden recognition of the strategic importance of the BRICS summit. So these are the movements that are taking place in the world. Third, we have a very strong, multifaceted cooperation with the United States. Jan Shukla also mentioned various aspects of it. And we have shared interests in the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific. But meanwhile, sufficient attention is not given to our economic and security interests on our northern continental flank. You know, you have that huge area there. After all, our confrontation with China in 2020 was on the continental flank. And then you have this huge area of Central Asia, which we lose track of because Pakistan has occupied a part of Kashmir. But beyond that, a sliver of land from Afghanistan, and then you're into Central Asia. And after the Americans vacated Afghanistan, that area has become the hotbed of interaction of multiple interests. I mean, you have, of course, Russia and China, which have had a condominium over this region. But then today you also have Iran, you have Afghanistan, you have Pakistan, and you go beyond that, you have Turkey. Now, we need to protect our security interests there because they can easily, security problems there can flow back into India. We also have economic interests there. That's a region very rich in natural resources, which we would like to avail of. And going further north, you have Russia. We've had an old relationship with Russia that's been spoken about ad nauseum. We have advantages today in our dealings with Russia. The External Affairs Minister talked about food, fuel, fertilizer, which we're getting. And if you think back to our national goals and ambitions, what is it? If you want to protect your economic growth and if you want to stay on the course to become a developed country, you cannot pass up opportunities of helping these economic interests just for, I might say, the luxury of criticizing Putin for his invasion into Ukraine. I think we need to be laser focused on what our interests are. And here again, I don't think we've been able to explain to the world why we are doing what we are doing. It's important that we have to be in the Central Asian region. Now, you go to the next step. How do you reach the Central Asian region? You can't go through Pakistan. You can't go through Afghanistan. Hence, Iran. Another point of confrontation or difference of opinion with our Western friends. We need Iran to reach Afghanistan. We need Iran to reach Central Asia because that is the only way that you can access the region and be present there. So it's not some kind of an obtuse imagination of India that leads us to do what we're doing. And this is again, it's a matter of explaining this to the world. And also the point that by doing all that we're doing, we're not actually stepping on the interests of our Western partners. We have been very careful not to contradict the interests of our Western partners. We can discuss it more in greater detail in the discussions later if there is time. Now come to the United States. The United States is the most consequential strategic partner of India. It has been so at least for 2 decades now. There's no doubt about that. And I have been intimately involved in our relations with the United States. From the year 2000, I was in the Prime Minister's office, the last part of the Clinton administration and the Bush administration. We laid the foundations for the strategic partnership that is now flourishing in so many different ways. The relationship has to be asymmetric. It is asymmetric. We are weaker, they are stronger. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about the fact that we need the United States much more than the United States needs us, in spite of the fact that they have political and economic interests in us, and we have security, political, and economic relations with them. But we are doing ourselves and brand Bharat no favors by quietly accepting all the brickbats being thrown to us by the Biden administration. And we've been doing that regularly in the last 2 years. Yesterday, Mr. Walter Mead mentioned the United States State Department having a congressional requirement to publish human rights, I think it was religious freedoms violations. Yes, it's a statutory requirement. They cover 150 countries in that. But when the US Secretary of State stands up in a press conference and singles out India among those 150 countries, besides Sudan and some other countries, I think you read a political message there. Even more egregious than that, on the day our Prime Minister lands in the United States, the White House, the National Security Council of the United States, invites a group of pro-Khalistani organizations and tells them publicly that the United States will protect you against transnational repression. So, it's like you're being kicked in the teeth. Well, in a different setting, I would use a different part of the anatomy to describe it. But you are being kicked in the teeth and patted on the head at the same time. And you're being asked to suffer the first and to appreciate the latter. I don't think we should accept that. Now, again, none of this is a statement against the United States. It's a statement against the administration that runs it today. And I think we should be strong enough, we are strong enough to be able to tell the administration that we cannot take this kind of humiliation. Of course, what they do about Khalistan also and the various court proceedings which we have heard of, it's been very badly handled. It actually reminds you of the lawfare that President Trump has been accusing the Biden administration of doing. But I think we need to be a little bit more careful of our own image in the world, and not be afraid to actually call out actions of even our strongest and most important strategic partner in what they do. As I said, I mean, this is basically the Biden administration. I mean, I've worked with the United States. I've worked with the Bush administration, and later on had opportunity to work with the Obama administration and also the first Trump administration. We didn't have these problems with the Bush administration. We didn't have these problems with the first Trump administration. I think there is a message in it there. Our Israeli colleague who spoke last, I just heard snippets of what he said. He talked about a woke agenda having taken hold of, I think he said, some parts of the United States. I think we are now seeing, or we have seen, because this administration is leaving, we have seen a woke agenda being taken hook, line, and sinker by the administration and exported to the world. That is something that doesn't suit us. It doesn't suit our thinking. And certainly, India Foundation is not inclined to accept that philosophy. And this is my last part only. Mr. Mathur mentioned this censorship, which gets exported to India. It's not one. I know two cases. Eminent Indian personalities who have been interviewed and which has been put up on YouTube. YouTube suppresses the viewership profile. It sends its algorithmic program, send it way down. You ask for it to be bumped up, you're willing to pay money, they say, sorry, we won't accept it. Why? Not because it is hate speech or any criticism of the United States. It criticized certain woke characteristics which are not acceptable to India. Now, if you do not have a social media platform of your own, and you're dependent on a social media platform of other countries, then you will be subjected to censorship, which will also muzzle you in the expression of your ideas around the world. I think we need to do something about this as well. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Right. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think in a very short time, you have expressed something which is very close to all our hearts, and you have brought it out so well. Now, we don't have any time for a Q&A session or for the interactive session. I'll close now with just two small remarks. One, it was stated, economy and security go hand in hand, and that is true. Yesterday, a point was put up by someone, why do you have a strong defense force? Why do you need it? And that is the whole point, because when we grow economically, if we do not have the muscle to defend ourselves, somebody will come and take away your hard-earned earnings. And this is one of the lessons which I think we need to understand as to why India got enslaved for 1,000 years. Why did foreigners come to rule over the Sone ki Chidiya? We were economically strong, but we didn't have the muscle to protect ourselves. Let us never fall into that trap again. That, I think, is one of the lessons which should come up here. The second point, which again had come out, I think, yesterday or day before, was external agencies playing a hand in destabilizing India. Now, there are two aspects to it. One, there is a denial, aisa nahi ho raha hai. And the second is a weeping, a whining, why is it happening? Let us understand it will happen. If we are going to rise, other people are going to try to suppress us. Nobody wants a competitor. So we understand it is happening. We should not live in denial. At the same time, we have to fight to ensure that they don't win and that our narrative and our forces win. With that, it remains for me to thank all three of you, very erudite speakers, one of the best intellectual minds of India, and thank you so much. May I request all of you to join me in giving them
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Master. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such an insightful discussion. Requesting the esteemed speakers to kindly remain on stage. Before we proceed with the felicitation of our distinguished panelists, I would now like to invite Mr. Rajesh Mysore from WMG Group for delivering the closing remarks.
Friends, the success of any nation shouldn't be measured by the eyes of any economic data that gives us wrong indicators. Let's look at how nations are made of. We'll have to go by the civilizational strength, the cultural ethos it has got, the kind of people it has got, the diversity, again, the demographic dividend it has got. However, what growth potential it has got makes a key difference. To define this, which other country can come as an example? It's our own Bharat. As we conclude this conclave last 3 days, the discussions have been very insightful and thought-provoking. I would like to say two things now. One is, again, we are in a big hope of the next 1 decade. This decade is a make or break for us. If you lose this, we lose the momentum. I would say, again, it's an opportunity of a lifetime for our great nation. And again, lastly, I would like to thank Shri Ram Madhavji and Rami for conceptualizing this mega event and the entire India Foundation team for bringing us together. Thank you, everybody. And Rami, help me close this session house.
Namaskar and good afternoon, everyone. Over the last 3 days, we have had the opportunity to hear over 70 stellar speakers and hear some of the most breakthrough ideas in the tradition of India Ideas Conclave. This is our 8th edition. Our theme this year was Building Brand Bharat. And I would like to say that something this large, bringing so many people together, including our distinguished guests, is not possible without the help of a lot of teams that work at the back end day in and day out. Thank you. But before I thank them, I would really like to say that it was really an honor for us to have uh, eminent personalities like Srimati Nirmala Sitharamanji, the Honorable Finance Minister of India, who came all the way to Bangalore to address this conclave. We would also like to thank the Minister of External Affairs, Dr. Jaishankar, who was traveling and yet managed to take out time to address us virtually. I would also thank Mr. Piyush Goyal, Minister of Commerce and Industry, and all our friends at the India Foundation, our elders, Suresh Prabhuji, Surya Prakashji, Sunena ma'am, all of you have been inspirational. All that remains for me to say now is a great, big thank you to the audience, to our distinguished guests, to our speakers who gave their intellect and their time freely to all of us. I would also like to thank WMG. This is the second time we are working with them. I'd like to give a special thank you to Rajesh, Shrikara, Minakshi, Ashwin, Madan, Abhilash, and Tarun. You all have been incredible. I would also like to thank our guests who've flown from the United States and Israel, who've taken the time out, have been here, Ofer, Yoram, Walter, and his delegation. It has been our honor to have you. But finally, I would like to thank my amazing, amazing team at India Foundation. I would like to thank Parth, who has been working day and night, and maybe many of you have not even seen him. I'd like to thank Akansha, Gyanshri, Pavan, Arpan, Ananya, who really went above and beyond to make sure that everybody's comfortable and everybody's happy. I would like to thank the Taj Hotel as well. Their staff, the management have done everything possible in their capacity to make sure that this event runs as smoothly as keeping with the standards of India Foundation events. Finally, I would like to thank Ram Madhavji. I would like to thank him on behalf of all our teams, because without him, it would not be possible. None of this would be possible to pull through, but let alone pull through, it would not even be possible to imagine. So thank you very much, sir. With this, I personally would like to thank you for being here and making this one of our most successful events. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rami ma'am. Now back to felicitating our distinguished panelist, for which I would like to invite Lieutenant General Arun Sani, Governing Council member of India Foundation, to felicitate Mr. P.S. Raghavan. I'd also like to invite Ms. Rupa Vasudevan, founder and chancellor of Bharatiya Engineering, Science and Technology Innovation University, to felicitate a Lieutenant General Raj Shukla. Also the governing council member of IF. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Rajesh Mysore from WMG Group to felicitate Mr. A.B. Mathur. I'd like to welcome Mr. Sumir Bhasin, founder and CEO of Anar Global, to felicitate Major General Dhruv C. Katuch. Dear panelists, please gather for a quick moment of photo. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience. We have had 3 days of insightful discussions where we had over 60 plus visionary speakers, where we enabled the India Ideas Conclave, where we are building brand Bharat all together. Thank you so much for being such enthusiastic people. We hereby conclude the 8th India Ideas Conclave 2024 for the moment, and we'll be back with a bang next year. Thank you so much, everybody. We have lunch waiting at the Prince of Wales. We hope to see you next year with more zeal and zest. Thank you.